Chapter 2191. Mr. Shu was stunned when he heard that. His face became bright red. Grand exalts were extraordinary existences. Across the entire Saints world, there were only a few grand exalts. Every single one of them was a legendary existence. Their Sky Empire possessed great heritage and possessed the right to become an everlasting empire. However, even if their Sky Empire really did become an everlasting existence, Grand Exalts would still be unreachable existences in their eyes. Getting a Grand Exalt to take action was just a fantasy. Moreover, if their Sky Empire really did possess the ability to get a Grand Exalt to take action, why would they need to fear Genshin? Let alone the fact that Genshin would not be able to threaten them in the future. Even if the fifth prince obtained a Grand Prime's legacy, these supreme prodigies probably would not be bold enough to lay their hands on him. At this moment, a thin layer of ice rapidly spread across Mr. Shu. In a single moment, Mr. Shu had been reduced to a lifelike statue of ice. Not only had Mr. Shu been sealed in ice, but even the remaining guards the fifth prince had brought with him, as well as the people from the Yun family, had all been bound up by Shui Yunlan. Even Yun Xian was not spared. Although they had the Divine King among them and Mr. Shu possessed a god artifact, Shui Yunlan was just too powerful. Before her, they were unable to resist at all. I won't harm your lives. Once I find your fifth prince and hand over the items in your space rings that belong to me according to our agreement, I'll let you go, Shui Yunlan said emotionlessly. Shui Yunlan said emotionlessly before stowing them away in a divine hall. She looked at Genshin, who was fleeing as quickly as he could in the distance, and a sliver of mixed feelings appeared in her eyes. Originally, I thought I wouldn't have any contact with you. Even if we did meet in the future, it would only be on the battlefield. After all, you're a person of the Immortals world, and you're the successor of the Sword Sect of Purple Heavens. You're an irreconcilable enemy of our Ice Goddess Hall. Although you and Her Highness were siblings in the lower realm, that was only because Her Highness had yet to recover her memories. Once Her Highness recovers her memories, I believe Her Highness will not forgive you. She will personally kill you. However, the Ice Goddess Hall is no longer the same as before. Apart from Mo Tianyin, there's no one else who can help us. If I want to find Mo Tianyin, I have to go through you. Shui Yunlan felt bitter inside. She sighed gently and chased after Genshin with a sliver of helplessness. Up ahead, when Genshin saw that the fifth prince had not died here and had instead vanished through a talisman, a smear of surprise appeared in his eyes. He glanced at the many divine kings who were closing in on him. In particular, when he saw some of the divine kings draw their god artifacts, he immediately stopped hesitating. He was about to use the linear lightning release to charge towards the exit. Suddenly, there was a flash of azure light. It shot past all the divine kings and charged towards Genshin with indescribable speed. Song Ying struck out. He shone with dazzling azure light, as if he had become an azure peng. He used the azure peng's movement technique to catch up to Genshin, wanting to stop Genshin from leaving. Although Song Ying's strength was one of the weakest among the divine kings, he was definitely one of the best in terms of speed with his azure peng's movement technique. There were very few people who could surpass him. Genshin, even if you have Ming Dong support, I'll make it so that you can't escape today. Determination filled Song Ying's eyes. He was indeed very fearful of Genshin's strength, but there were so many divine kings chasing after Genshin right now. He believed that even if Ming Dong was here, he would not be able to turn the situation around. All he needed to do was keep Genshin busy for a few seconds, and Genshin would be surrounded by the many divine kings. When Song Ying struck out, two other flying swords shone with dazzling light. They shot through the air with the pulses that belonged to god artifacts, directly shooting towards Genshin. Song Ying. Genshin naturally discovered the pursuing Song Ying as well. A cold light flashed through his eyes as his killing intent surged. Clearly, Song Ing had seen him use the 2 strands of profound sword qi, which was why he had chased after him fearlessly. However, Song Ing did not know that he had already condensed a 3rd strand of profound sword qi. However, Jianqin did not prepare to use the 3rd strand of profound sword qi. Song Ing was indeed very fast, but he was still slightly slower than his linear lightning release. Suddenly, a streak of green light shot into the air. Aladona had condensed a tree of life from her thick life force. Countless vines flooded out with lightning speed, wrapping around Jianqin and the 2 god artifacts to buy time for Jianqin. Jianqin was slightly stunned by Aladona's sudden attack. He glanced back in her direction, and in the next moment he began to shine with dazzling light. Under the envelopment of the sword qi, he vanished from the exit with lightning speed, entering the 11th floor. Behind him, the many divine kings continued to pursue him. They followed Jianqin to the 11th floor, although Jianqin had vanished with the linear lightning release as soon as he arrived on the 11th floor, avoiding the range of the senses of the divine king souls. He was still unable to avoid leaving behind some traces. There's still an undetectable strand of sword qi in the air. He's gone this way. He's headed in the direction of the 10th floor. Chase him. We can't let him leave the Azure Poseidon Palace, the many divine kings called out. They pursued Jianqin as quickly as they could according to the traces he had left behind. Shui Yunlan and Aladona happened to be among them as well. The 2 of them charged at the very front. Aladona, go chase after Jianqin. Take Jianqin into your divine hall. That way he'll be much safer. I'll buy some time for you. Suddenly, Shui Yunlan communicated with Aladona secretly. Afterwards, under Aladona's surprised and confused gaze, Shui Yunlan suddenly struck out. She began to attack the divine kings near her, injuring several of them instantly. Be *starred, what are you doing? Sir, there's no grievance between us. Why have you suddenly launched a sneak attack on me? Immediately, furious roars rang out in Shui Yunlan's surroundings. The many divine kings all roared out furiously. Why aren't you leaving? There are too many divine kings here. I can't last for too long. Shui Yunlan called out to Aladona. Shui Yunlan growled at Adriana. Her silver-white armor gave off a powerful aura of coldness. At the same time, a fist-sized pearl hovered above her head, pulsing with the pulses of a god artifact. When she bought time for the 5th prince earlier, Shui Yunlan had not used her god artifact. She had held back. However, she had already taken out her god artifact now. Clearly, she was prepared to fight with her full strength. After all, not only were there several times more divine kings than before, but many of them had even made it into the top 100. Their battle prowess was extremely great. Jianqin constantly used the linear lightning release. Before long, he left the 11th floor and entered the 10th. Afterwards, he did not stop for even a moment. He also used the linear lightning release to travel several million kilometers away from the entrance. Only then did he stop. Afterwards, he changed his appearance again, controlling the chaotic body to change his appearance. He turned into a ruddy old man and flew towards the 9th floor at a steady pace. Those divine kings should be here very soon. However, I've already changed my appearance again. As long as I don't use chaotic force or profound sword qi, they shouldn't be able to recognize me, Jianqin thought. He had already thought of quite a few excuses. Once he was stopped and questioned, he would use those excuses to deal with them. However, to his surprise, the journey afterwards was extremely smooth. Even when he left the 10th floor and arrived on the 9th floor, he did not come across a single divine king. Instead, he discovered many regular divine kings and a few over-gods moving about in search of their own fortunes. Jianqin maintained a low profile as he traveled in a straight line on the 9th floor. Before long, he re-entered the Neptunian mountains that he had left for several years. As soon as he entered the range of the Neptunian mountains, Chanlong appeared before Jianqin, silently. It really was like he had teleported, making no sound at all. Jianqin was unable to sense him at all. He could only discover him with his naked eye. "I knew you wouldn't die so easily," Chanlong smiled. Chen's return allowed him to let out a sigh of relief. "How did you recognize me?" Jianchen rubbed his nose and asked in surprise. Right now, he had disguised himself as a ruddy old man and concealed all of his presence. Yet Chanlong recognized him with a single glance. Chapter 2192. Jianchen came to a realization as he sighed in amazement inside. He knew that Chanlong's control over the Neptunian mountains had become greater and greater after staying there for so many years. "Is Kea all right?" Chanlong asked. He felt a strange sense of familiarity with Kea, and this sense of familiarity only grew stronger as his strength increased. He naturally cared about Kea very much. Jianchen nodded. He glanced behind him and said, "Let's go. Let's go in first." Chanlong could tell what Jianchen was worried about. He could not help but chuckle aloud. "I've heard about the disturbance you and Kea have caused in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. However, you don't have to worry about anything in the Neptunian mountains. They're not the ones who call the shots here," Chanlong said with a sense of dominance and disdain towards the Divine King. However, he did indeed have the right to do that. He had grasped the Grand Exalt's formation in the Neptunian mountains, so he did indeed have the confidence to fear no one in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. Jianchen and Chanlong immediately returned to the cave they had created several years ago. At the same time, the alluring Aladona hovered in the sky in her green dress on the 10th floor of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, where Jianchen had changed his body for the second time. Dense and pure life force radiated from her, making everything spring. The barren land was filled with the presence of life once again. A layer of greenery grew from the ground at a visible rate, extending into the distance. Aladona had not purposefully caused this. Instead, it was completely due to the powerful life force radiating from her. All traces of him have disappeared here. Aladona studied the surroundings as the senses of her soul flooded the surroundings. A while later, she smiled bitterly. This kid is getting better and better at hiding himself. He actually didn't leave behind any traces at all. How am I supposed to find him now? I don't have a lot of secret techniques for finding people, and he didn't even leave behind a single presence. I can't find him with the secret techniques I know. It looks like I can only rely on them. Aladona glanced in the direction of the 11th floor before leaving. She hid herself several tens of thousand kilometers away carefully. Before long, a large group of divine kings surged over. They arrived in the direction where Jianchen's presence had vanished. Every single one of their faces were very ugly, and many of them were injured. Although their injuries did not seem severe, they seemed rather horrible. However, Shui Yunlan was not one of them. All traces and auras have disappeared from this place. If it weren't for the fact that we were delayed by the person with the power of ice wasting so much time, it would have been impossible for Jianchen to escape from our grasp. He can escape. He used a secret technique to turn back time and make the past appear before his eyes. Immediately, a divine king stepped forward from the group. He used a secret technique to turn back time and make the past appear before him. Immediately, Aladona, who had arrived before them, appeared again. However, her figure was rather blurry and unclear. Both Aladona's cultivation and comprehension surpassed the divine king who had turned back time. As a result, the divine king could only see Aladona's blurry figure when he used the secret technique. However, no one paid any attention to Aladona. Instead, they waited quietly. Finally, after a few seconds, Jianchen appeared in the turning back time. The divine kings in the surroundings saw everything he did clearly, including the direction he had left in. The divine kings in the surroundings did not hesitate at all. They all pursued in the direction that Jianchen had left in. Jianqin had a simple conversation with Qianlong in the Neptunian mountains on the 9th floor before directly arriving, where Heya cultivated. When Heya saw Jianqin, he was clearly surprised. However, he rejoiced soon afterwards and let out a sigh of relief inside. He said, "It's been rumored that you've been thrown into the lava of the 8th floor. I thought you were already dead. Don't worry. My life isn't that easy to take." "Heya, get ready quickly and come with me," said Jianqin. Heya gradually became stern when he saw how stern Jianqin was. He asked, "Where are we going?" "The 5th prince of your Sky Empire is quite lucky. He's received the recognition of a Grand Prime's legacy." "What? A Grand Prime's legacy?" Heya paled in fright as he paled. It could be said that he had already betrayed the 5th prince. Once the 5th prince left the Neptunian Poseidon Palace alive, he would definitely skyrocket with the assistance of the Grand Prime's legacy. If he discovered his betrayal, the 5th prince would never spare his clan with his personality. "Don't worry. He didn't receive the complete legacy. I interrupted him at a crucial moment, but he managed to flee with a ring left behind by a Grand Prime. However, I'm certain that it's impossible for the 5th prince to escape the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. He must be hiding somewhere right now. I need your innate ability to find him." "Now is the best time to kill him," said Jianqin. Although the battle on the 12th floor was chaotic, he could see everything clearly. When the 5th prince fled, he was alone. He did not have any guards. Even Mr. Shu, the only person who could stop him, was not present. Killing him was as easy as flipping his hand. Afterwards, Jianqin quickly left the Neptunian mountains with Heya. As he hurried along, he consumed the heavenly resources he had obtained from the divine medicinal garden. Some of the heavenly resources could recover the power of the soul, allowing him to recover from the exhaustion from the 2 strands of profound sword chi. "The 5th prince isn't on this floor. Let's go down." Heya also used his innate ability to search for the 5th prince's traces. Clearly, no one could replace him at that moment. Jianqin arrived on the 8th floor with Heya. He avoided Mingdong and the Divine King, who had yet to receive news of the 12th floor. He had Heya sense the 5th prince again. "He's not on this floor either." "We have to go further down," said Heya. Without any hesitation, Jianqin immediately arrived on the 7th floor with Heya. "I found him. The 5th prince is hiding on the 7th floor. He's over 5 million kilometers away from us in that direction." Very soon, Heya's eyes lit up as he accurately pointed out the 5th prince's location. A vicious light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. He said, "Heya, it's still not suitable for you to meet the 5th prince right now. Hide in the Divine Hall for now." Jianqin took out a Divine Hall and refined it briefly before having Heya hide in there. The Divine Hall was one of his spoils. Although it was not of great quality, it was enough to hide someone. On the other hand, Jianqin concealed his presence and concealed himself. He flew towards the 5th prince's hiding spot alone. At that moment, the 5th prince, who was in a sorry state and had disheveled hair, was hiding in a hidden cave deep underground with a pale face. The muscles on his face were completely distorted, causing him to appear incomparably ferocious. His eyes, which had turned completely red, also revealed overflowing hatred and fury. "Jianqin, Jianqin, I will never let you go. I will never let you go. I swear that I will make you suffer the most painful torture in the world until you die a Grand Prime's legacy." "That's a Grand Prime's legacy. I was just a step away, just a tiny step away, and I would have been able to inherit a Grand Prime's legacy. It's all because of you, Jianqin. It's all because of you that I missed the opportunity to reach the heavens in a single step. I will pull out your tendons, skin you, drink your blood, and eat your flesh. I will make you wish you were dead." Chapter 2193. There are countless people who want to steal my legacy. There are countless people who want to steal my fortune. It's a pity that I won't let you get what you want. I won't let you succeed because this is my fortune." The fifth prince gritted his teeth as he was filled with resentment. Then he looked at the space ring on his finger. The space ring had flown out from the forehead of the Grand Prime statue. It belonged to a Grand Prime of the Taoist sect of Neptunia, so its value was obvious. However, the fifth prince was not satisfied with the space ring. He knew that the space ring was only a small part of the Grand Prime's legacy at most. As a matter of fact, it could not even be called a legacy. It could only be regarded as the legacy of a Grand Prime. The core part, the most important part, could only be obtained through the Grand Prime statue. After quite a while, the fifth prince finally calmed down. He silently endured the piercing pain from his soul as determination filled his eyes. He thought, "I can't leave the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. I have to obtain the legacy of a Grand Prime. Moreover, I've already obtained the recognition of the Grand Prime's legacy, so there should be a way for me to enter the statue again." At this moment, the cave that the fifth prince was hiding in suddenly began to tremble, and a large amount of dust drifted down. The fifth prince's face suddenly changed. Without any hesitation, he immediately used a supreme quality saint artifact to protect himself. Afterwards, he drew a sword and stabbed upwards as hard as he could. Boom! With a muffled sound, a strand of sword chi with a destructive, violent energy stabbed down from the ground. It pierced through several dozen meters of rock like a hot knife through butter and shot into the cave hidden deep underground with great precision, colliding with the fifth prince's sword. Immediately, the ground shook and soil was thrown into the air. With the collision, the cave the fifth prince hid in directly collapsed, completely swallowing the cave in a single moment. Blood sprayed from the fifth prince's mouth. Viciousness and viciousness filled his face. He roared out furiously and directly charged out of the cave. "It's actually you, Genshin." The fifth prince hovered in the sky with his sword as he looked at Genshin, who just happened to hover before him. He could not help but roar out furiously. His bloodshot eyes seemed like they were about to spit out fire. "Long time no see, fifth prince. May I ask how it feels hiding underground?" Genshin smiled faintly as he asked calmly. He seemed like he was at ease. Genshin's words were blatant mockery in the fifth prince's ears. His face immediately became twisted as he roared out, "Genshin, haven't you gone through so much trouble to find me because you want my space ring? Since you want it so much, I'll give it to you." With that, the fifth prince removed the space ring on his finger without any hesitation. He was about to throw it away, but he pulled out a talisman with lightning-like speed and activated it as quickly as he could. Although the fifth prince's hatred for Genshin surged, he had not lost his rationality. He knew that even though he possessed an advantage in terms of cultivation, he was definitely not Genshin's opponent. As a result, he chose to flee without any hesitation. Genshin reacted extremely quickly as well. With a flash of silver-white light, his sword stabbed towards the fifth prince with lightning-like speed. However, the talisman in the fifth prince's hand was extraordinary. It was of a very high grade. The moment it was activated, the fifth prince vanished with it, causing Genshin's sword to miss. "You're not stupid after all. You haven't lost your head from anger, but do you think you can escape?" Genshin sneered as he immediately called out Heya. The Tsang Poseidon Palace was large, with each floor being its own miniature world. However, with Heya present, the fifth prince would not be able to escape no matter where he fled. Several hours later, Genshin directly descended to the third floor from the seventh floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Under Heya's guidance, he arrived in a swamp filled with poisonous gas and poisonous insects. At this moment, the fifth prince had concealed his presence in the depths of the swamp. He hid himself in a part of the swamp. Not a single ripple of energy leaked out from his body. He had completely fused with the swamp as he silently used pills to heal his wounds. Genshin's battle prowess was far greater than his. Although he was only an early divine king, a casual strike from him could unleash the might of a supreme over-god. As a result, the fifth prince had been directly injured by Jianshen's sword qi that had penetrated several dozen meters into the ground. Moreover, his soul had been injured by the profound sword qi, so he had to endure the tearing pain from his soul at all times. How did Jianshen find me? How long has it been since I fled from the 12th floor? How did he find me in such a large place like the Tsang Poseidon Palace in such a short amount of time? Moreover, I've already hidden myself well enough. The fifth prince completely calmed down as the light in his cold eyes flickered. Suddenly, the fifth prince felt the swamp in the surroundings shake violently. Before he could react, Jianshen had already appeared in his eyes. Protected by the light of the sword, he shone with dazzling light, pushing away the swamp in the surroundings. He stabbed out with his supreme quality saint artifact as soon as possible. This time, Jianshan moved extremely quickly. He arrived in the swamp as soon as he appeared and launched a thunderous strike. He did not give the fifth prince any chance to escape at all. The fifth prince did not put away his supreme quality saint artifact armor. However, he had completely concealed the pulses of the supreme quality saint artifact, making it seem like an ordinary item. Jianshen's strike directly landed on the supreme quality saint artifact. The strike that was as powerful as a supreme god king's was truly devastating, immediately causing the supreme quality saint artifact to dim. The fifth prince coughed up blood as he was blown away. Jianshen's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. He followed up with another attack, basically sticking close to the fifth prince as he flew away. With a flash, he stabbed out a second time. The fifth prince paled in fright as shock filled his heart. Only when he faced Jianshen in person did he truly understand just how powerful Jianshen was. He truly understood just how terrifying Jianshen was when his battle prowess was no weaker than an expert from the God King's throne. He basically could not fight back at all. Explode! In a split second, the fifth prince tossed out the supreme quality saint artifact sword that had followed him for many years. With a bellow, the supreme quality saint artifact exploded in a dazzling light. The powerful shockwave of energy completely obliterated the swamp. As for the fifth prince, he used the obstruction from the explosion of the saint artifact to take out the simple talisman as soon as possible and flee. Jianshen struck out with his sword. His sword qi shot out like a streak of light, cleaving the shockwave from the fifth prince's explosion in half. He stared at the space where the fifth prince had disappeared with a cold gaze. Chapter 2194. With Heiya's help, Jianshen was not afraid of the fifth prince escaping at all. Even if the fifth prince fled to the ends of the world, no matter how well hidden he was, Heiya would still be able to find him. Several hours later, Jianshen found the fifth prince on the fifth floor. Having learned his lesson from the previous 2 times, he was clearly even more cautious this time. He sent out a strand of profound sword qi from very far away. With the recovery of the god-tier heavenly resources, he had recovered some of the power of his soul from the 2 strands of profound sword qi earlier. As a result, the power of his soul would not be depleted completely when he used the 3rd strand of profound sword qi. The profound sword qi moved with unbelievable speed. It shot through the air at a speed that many Supreme Divine King would not be able to react to, directly shooting towards the fifth prince, who was hiding in a hidden cave. Arg! Immediately, the fifth prince's miserable cries rang out from the cave. They were like the wails of ghosts, extremely miserable. Even if the fifth prince was in peak condition, he would not have been able to dodge or fend off the profound sword qi, let alone now that he was injured. As a result, the profound sword qi directly struck his soul. In the distance, Jianshen strolled leisurely through the air as if he was taking a stroll. He made his way towards the fifth prince, crossing several hundred meters with each step. In just a while, he arrived before the fifth prince. He stared at the fifth prince, who was lying on the ground like a pile of mud. His gaze was cold, without any pity at all. Jianchen knew the power of his profound sword qi better than anyone else. Almost 80% of the fifth prince's soul had collapsed after receiving a strand of profound sword qi. He was close to death. Even though he still had the simple talisman in his hand, he did not have the strength to take it out. After all, after condensing the third strand of profound sword qi, the power of each strand of profound sword qi had increased significantly. Even the divine king might not be able to endure it. Although it was rather wasteful to use a strand of profound sword qi on the fifth prince had the talisman on him. If he wanted to flee, it would be very difficult for Jianchen to stop him. Therefore, he had no choice but to use the profound sword qi. Jianchen cut off the fifth prince's finger and removed the Grand Prime's space ring. He sneered, "Fifth prince, you probably never thought you would end up like this. During this trip to the Blue Poseidon Palace, you should have leaped over the Dragon Gate and soared into the sky with a single bound. You had great prospects in the future, but in the end, you stepped into the Yellow Springs." The fifth prince powerlessly lay on the ground. His face was terrifyingly pale, but his dull and lifeless eyes were still filled with resentment. He gritted his teeth and said, "Heya, it's that traitor Heya. I never thought that he would side with you. Only Heya has the ability to easily find me here. That's right. The Blue Poseidon Palace is so big. If I wanted to find you in the 12 small worlds, without the help of Black Crow, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for sending Heya and Bai Qi to kill me in the past. If it weren't for that matter, we would have minded our own business and would not have ended up like this. I wouldn't have had the chance to subdue Heya either. Perhaps I wouldn't have done anything to you even if you had inherited the Grand Prime's legacy, allowing you to take away such a great fortuitous encounter successfully. However, since we've already become mortal enemies, I can't let you inherit the Grand Prime's legacy, just in case it brings me endless trouble or even death. That's why you ended up like this today, because of yourself," Jianchen said slowly. "Because of myself? Ha ha ha, that's right. I did end up like this because of myself. If it weren't for that bitch Yin Xian, how would I have ended up like this? It's all because of that bitch Yin Xian that I want to kill you. Ha!" The fifth prince laughed maniacally as he began to regret his actions. He should have never offended Jianchen over a woman. However, there was no point in regretting now that things had developed to this point. His soul had been injured by the profound sword qi, and around 80% of it had dispersed. What remained of his soul contained a sliver of the power of the profound sword qi. As the profound sword qi ground away at it, it dispersed bit by bit as well. It was unstoppable. Jianchen knew that the fifth prince's soul was about to disperse, so he called out Heya and got him to personally witness the fifth prince's death. "Heya, you traitor!" As soon as he saw Heya, the fifth prince became filled with resentment. If it weren't for Heya, how would Jianchen have found him? Perhaps he would have been able to find an opportunity to enter the Grand Prime's statue again and receive the complete legacy. However, all his hopes had been shattered because of Heya. "Your Highness, please don't blame me. I only wanted to survive. Rest in peace." Heya clasped his fist at the fifth prince sternly and sent him off. "You." The fifth prince glared at Heya. He was exceptionally furious, but this accelerated the rate at which his nascent spirit was collapsing. In the end, his nascent spirit dissipated, and his body and soul were destroyed. He turned into an ice-cold corpse. "Hey, you greets master." With the fifth prince's death, Heya immediately dropped to one knee before Jianchen and swore an oath. He truly accepted Jianchen as his master and submitted to Jianchen. Jianchen nodded slightly. He was filled with joy after subduing Heya. Heya's innate ability was indeed very useful at crucial moments. It could play an unimaginable role. Afterwards, Jianchen began to check the space ring he had obtained from the fifth prince. The space ring was truly something left behind by a Grand Prime. As soon as he saw the items inside, Jianshin's attention was drawn away by the small pile of multicolored divine crystals. These are 5-colored divine crystals. Jianshin's heart skipped a beat. He was filled with great joy. Above supreme grade divine crystals were colored divine crystals. Colored divine crystals were divided into grades as well, ranging from 1-colored to 5-colored divine crystals. Although there were not a lot of colored divine crystals, only a few thousand of them, they were all 5-colored divine crystals. Just these several thousand 5-colored divine crystals were a great fortune. Aside from that, there were several god artifacts. One of them was a sword that was 2 fingers wide. The moment he saw the sword, Jianshin's eyes immediately lit up with desire. He was extremely excited. Ever since his startling rainbow sword broke, he had never found a suitable artifact. Even the supreme quality saint artifact sword he was using right now did not suit him completely. However, the discovery of this divine artifact level-long sword made his heart pound with eagerness. Every single god artifact is protected by a layer of formations, but it's not difficult for me to get through the formations, Jianshin thought as he became eager to try. God artifacts were the weapons of primordial realm experts. There were very few divine kings who could use god artifacts. Even among the supreme divine kings, there were not a lot of people who could use god artifacts. If this god artifact sword really ended up in his hands, he could not guarantee that he could use it. So this is a cosmic movement talisman. Jianshin took out several simple talismans from his space ring again. To no surprise, these talismans were what the 5th prince had used to flee. There were only 3 left now. Even the formations cast down by some grand primes can't stop cosmic movement talismans. These cosmic movement talismans really are powerful. Jianshin truly understood the power of the cosmic movement talisman from its introduction. He felt fortunate. Fortunately, he was in the Tsangshuan Poseidon Palace, or the 5th prince would have fled to the outside world through the cosmic movement talisman long ago. The Tsangshuan Poseidon Palace was a high-quality god artifact, after all. It was extraordinarily powerful. The cosmic movement talisman was indeed of very high quality, where even the formations cast down by some grand primes could not stop it. However, it was still unable to break through the restrictions of the Tsangshuan Poseidon Palace. Chapter 2195. I wrote down the wrong number of cosmic movement talismans in the previous chapter. Jianshin only obtained 3 from the space ring, so I wrote down 6. I've corrected it now. 3 cosmic movement talismans represent 3 chances to save my life. As long as I have them, I'll be able to escape even if I come across grand primes, Jianshin thought. He was overjoyed. The cosmic movement talisman was truly a priceless treasure. Of course, he also understood just how terrifying grand primes were. Whether he could escape from them with the cosmic movement talisman depended on whether he could activate the talisman in time. Jianshin continued to look through the space ring. He found a few heavenly resources and various forging materials. Without any exception, all of them were at the god tier. The only flaw was that there were not a lot of god tier materials, but every single one of them was extremely rare and precious. There were only 5 heavenly resources, and they were all at the god tier. They were shockingly high. Jianshin estimated that they were at the 6th grade of god tier at the very least, or even the 7th grade at the very least. They pulsed with extremely powerful energy. There should have been more heavenly resources, but the owner of the space ring used them all up. Only these 5 are left in the end, Jianshin thought. He saw over 20 jade boxes used to store heavenly resources, but they were all empty now. Moreover, there were quite a few pill bottles that gave off a faint fragrance. However, to Jianshin's disappointment, all of them were empty. He had already guessed that the owner of the space ring had used up all the heavenly resources and pills when he fought against the samsaric immortal Exalt. Method of the scorching world, devastating flames. This is a cultivation method that can be cultivated to chaotic prime. At this moment, Jianqin took out an ancient book from the space ring, and his eyes lit up slightly. The cultivation method just happened to be suitable for people who comprehended the laws of fire. Although he did not know whether it would be of help to Kea, it was definitely suitable for Honglian. It's a pity that there's only a single cultivation method. It's only enough to reach chaotic prime. I can probably only obtain a grand prime cultivation method through the complete legacy. Jianqin sighed softly and felt slightly regretful. Then his attention descended onto the god artifact, and his eyes instantly shone with a blazing light. He immediately sat down cross-legged and started to recover the energy of his soul. The effects of the god-tier heavenly resource he had ingested earlier had not been completely depleted yet. It was just that the power of his soul had recovered rather slowly as he hurried along. Now that he had refined it with his full strength, the effects of the heavenly resource immediately depleted at several times the normal rate, allowing the power of his soul to recover at several times the normal rate. 2 days later, the power of Jianqin's soul finally recovered. He immediately began to attack the formation that protected the god artifact. The sword that Jianqin wanted was a low-quality god artifact, so the formation around it was not particularly powerful. Under Jianqin's full-powered attacks, he smashed through the formation in just half a day and removed the sword. As soon as the god artifact appeared, it gave off a tremendous presence. It shone resplendently as the pulse of a god artifact radiated out. Powerful sword chi shot out as it began to attack Jianqin. The sword was an undamaged god artifact. It possessed a complete artifact spirit, so the moment Jianqin grabbed the sword, the artifact spirit resisted. Come after you reach the primordial realm. You're dreaming if you think you can possess me as a mere divine king. At the same time, a thought was transmitted into Jianqin's head. This was the voice of the artifact spirit. It was extremely arrogant and filled with disdain towards Jianqin. With that, the sword chi from the sword became even more powerful. The sword began to struggle in Jianqin's hand, wanting to break free. Jianqin smiled faintly. His clothes had been ripped to shreds by the sword chi, but he did not mind at all. He gripped the sword firmly in his right hand and immediately sat down. He began to refine it as hard as he could. He wanted to try and grasp the god artifact. He knew that once he grasped the god artifact, his battle prowess would increase immeasurably. Immediately, the artifact spirit resisted even more intensely. It shone with dazzling light, forming a rain of swords that attacked Jianqin's body. It was filled with killing intent. At the same time, a powerful strand of sword chi directly invaded Jianqin's soul in an attempt to heavily injure his sea of consciousness. Jianqin remained as steady as a mountain. He did not move at all. More and more wounds appeared on his body, gradually dyeing him red. He used the Anita Tower to guard the front of his soul. The profound sword chi shone with dazzling light as well, fending off the attacks that invaded his soul. As Jianqin refined the god artifact, the divine king who remained on the 8th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace finally received news of Jianqin's appearance. It immediately shocked everyone. What did you say? Jianqin didn't die after falling into the lava. He appeared on the 12th floor? How is that possible? The lava is so terrifying. How did he survive? At the same time, Mingdong, who sat cross-legged in the sky, suddenly opened his eyes. His face was filled with excitement and joy that was impossible to conceal. He didn't hesitate at all and immediately shot towards the 9th level. The 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing followed behind him silently. They carried out their duties loyally, never taking a single step away from Mingdong. A large group of divine kings had arrived on the 9th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace outside the Neptunian Mountains. Just the divine king alone amounted to several hundred. These divine kings had used various secret techniques to track down Jianqin's whereabouts through the reversal of time. They had finally chased him to the Neptunian Mountains. Everyone, may I ask why you've gathered so many people to my Neptunian mountains? My Neptunian mountains doesn't have that many dwellings to accommodate so many of you. At this moment, Chanlong appeared before everyone silently. He clasped his fist with a smile. All the divine kings came to a halt. They all stared at Chanlong in surprise and doubt. This was because none of them had discovered how Chanlong had appeared here. It was completely silent. May I ask who you are, and why have you stopped us? A divine king asked sternly. His gaze was piercing. I am Chanlong. The Neptunian mountains are my territory. If you want to enter, you naturally need my permission, Chanlong said leisurely. He was rather proud. What? You're saying the Neptunian mountains are your territory? Ha ha ha. Many divine kings could not help but burst into laughter when they heard Chanlong's words. Not only were they familiar with the Neptunian mountains, but they were even familiar with it. This was because there was a formation cast down by a grand exalt in the Neptunian mountains. When the Taoist sect of Neptunian was still around, the Neptunian mountains were the sacred grounds and sacred mountains of the sect. It was extremely renowned. Anyone who cultivated in the Neptunian mountains would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. In particular, it was extremely effective for breaking through bottlenecks. As a result, basically every time the Azure Poseidon Palace opened, people would specially come here to cultivate, comprehend their cultivation, break through bottlenecks, and so on. However, no matter how powerful a supreme god king was, they would not dare to claim that this was their territory. Chapter 2196. Ha ha ha! Who's this rotten old man? How dare he say that the Neptunian mountains are his territory? Has he been beaten up in the head? Or is there something wrong with his head? Where did this rotten old man come from? He's only a mid-divine king. Yet he dares to call himself king of the Neptunian mountains. That's not all. Most importantly, he even dares to stand in our way. Old man, do you think your Aoyama, who ranks first under the divine king, even Aoyama, who ranks first under the divine king, wouldn't dare to claim the Neptunian mountains for himself? The many divine kings were angered to the point of laughter. They all stared at Chanlong like they were looking at an idiot. At the same time, over 100 figures hovered in the air within the Neptunian mountains. They approached the area at a steady pace. These people had been cultivating in the Neptunian mountains in the first place. They wanted to use the special environment to comprehend the ways of the world and break through bottlenecks. As a result, they did not take part in any of the disputes within the Poseidon Palace. However, when they saw so many divine kings in the Neptunian mountains, they all came to find out the reason out of curiosity. Among the over 100 divine kings, there were only a few supreme divine kings below the divine king. Most of them were regular divine kings, so they did not get too close. They observed from very far away. Rotten old man, since you've said that this is your territory, are these people all your retainers, servants, or servants? A divine king sneered. Don't waste your breath on him. Pursuing Genshin is more important. Kill all those who stand in our way. A divine king with a face filled with viciousness bellowed out and directly attacked Chanlong. He threw a punch towards Chanlong's head mercilessly with the sound of wind and thunder. The divine king was very powerful. Just the power of the punch was enough to make many other divine kings show fear. Chanlong's expression did not change at all when he faced the attack from a divine king. He said leisurely, Stop. Stop wasting your efforts. No one can harm me in my territory. No one took Chanlong's words seriously at all. However, what happened next took everyone by surprise. The divine king's punch actually stopped right in front of Chanlong. I won't hold it against you for offending me this time, but I don't wish for the same thing to happen a second time. Piss off from the Neptunian mountains, Chanlong said calmly. Chanlong said calmly. His calm voice was filled with an inviolable sense of authority. Most importantly, as soon as he finished speaking, the divine king who had attacked him actually flew out. However, his posture seemed extremely strange. It was as if he had been immobilized, yet he remained in his attacking posture. Only when he flew out of the Neptunian mountains did the divine king finally regain control over his body. However, he struggled to remain calm at this moment. He stared at Qianlong in shock as his heart churned. He cried out, Who are you?" All of his actions were clearly seen by the people in the surroundings, causing the surroundings to immediately fall silent. Even the people who had mocked and ridiculed Qianlong earlier could not help but shut their mouths as they revealed shocked and horrified expressions. There was also some confusion on their faces. Clearly, they all knew that Qianlong must have been the reason why the Divine King had obediently retreated from the Neptunian mountains. However, they had no idea how Qianlong did it, or how he did it. How is this possible? He can actually control the Grand Exalts formation in the Neptunian mountains. That's impossible. At this moment, a divine king with some accomplishments in the way of formations cried out. His eyes had almost popped out as if he had seen a ghost. Immediately, it caused a huge commotion. After learning that Qianlong could actually control the Grand Exalts formation, the expressions of all the divine kings gathered there, including the divine kings who had always been cultivating in the Neptunian mountains, changed drastically. They were filled with shock. Afterwards, the several hundred divine kings who were about to enter the Neptunian mountains to hunt down Jianqin all retreated several kilometers away, distancing themselves from the boundary of the Neptunian mountains. Even the 100-plus people who were originally cultivating in the Neptunian mountains did not dare to remain there. With shock, they left the Neptunian mountains as quickly as they could, as if they were fleeing for their lives. This was because they all understood that if the Grand Exalts formation in the Neptunian mountains had really been grasped by someone, they would be under someone's control at all times if they remained there. Their lives would be completely out of their control. Sir, do you plan on protecting Jianqin? You better think this through. Once you do that, you'll become an enemy of all of us. Unless you stay in the Neptunian mountains forever, any one of us can kill you easily with your mere cultivation as a mid-divine king. A divine king called out from the crowd. They had finally become serious towards Qianlong. Qianlong did not care about their threats at all. He said, "If Jianqin was in the Neptunian mountains, I would indeed protect him. Unfortunately, he's not in the Neptunian mountains." As he said that, Qianlong's eyes suddenly became lost for a moment. Jianqin's figure appeared in his head. Although his face was extremely familiar, it also seemed rather distant. "Then do you know where Jianqin has gone?" A divine king asked. "I can find Jianqin." As soon as the divine king finished speaking, a vigorous voice rang out from behind. The supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque, Mo Cheng, flew over slowly. "Young master, why have you come?" Song Ying's face changed slightly with Mo Cheng's arrival. He immediately flew out from the crowd, but soon afterwards he stared at Mo Cheng blankly and asked, "Young master, you've broken through successfully?" "That's right. I've already made it far enough as an overgod. I've stood high enough. It's time for me to break through." Mo Cheng nodded at Song Ying before staring at the many divine kings gathered there. He showed no fear at all, and he said in a manner that was neither haughty nor humble, "I had an intense battle with Jianqin in the past, so I used the opportunity to collect a droplet of his blood. If someone else had obtained it, they probably wouldn't have been able to do anything at all. But in my hands, I can use a secret technique to find Jianqin." "Ha ha ha, you really are the successor of the Azure Peng King after all. You really have inherited some of the Azure Peng King's legacy." Mo Cheng, use the secret technique and find Jianqin. A black-robed old man laughed heartily. A black-robed old man laughed aloud. Even though Mo Cheng was only an early god king, no one present dared to underestimate him. This was because not only was Mo Cheng ranked first on the Overgod's plaque and possessed tremendous potential, where it was very likely for him to make it into the top 10 of the Divine King's ranking, but he was also the Azure Peng King's disciple. His status was so great that it exceeded most of the divine kings present. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 2197. Afterwards, Mo Cheng took out the droplet of chaotic blood he had obtained from Jianchen. He immediately used a secret technique, using the chaotic blood as a guide to search for Jianchen. When Mo Cheng used the secret technique, divine kings immediately appeared in the surroundings to protect him. Clearly, they wanted to befriend him. I found his location. Very soon, Mo Cheng opened his eyes. His gaze sharpened, and with a single movement, he shot off into the distance. Ming Dong, since you're Jianchen's sworn brother, you must have appeared when Jianchen was surrounded. Humph, this time, I'll use everyone's power to kill you. I'll make you pay a heavy price for your arrogance. So what if you're a supreme divine king? There have been many divine kings who have died in the saints' world. It's a pity that there's no grievances between us. The only reason why I want to kill you is because you hunted down my protector, my master servant, and the people of my Azure Pung lineage. How can my Azure Pung lineage be so easy to bully? Mo Cheng thought as heavy killing intent brewed in his heart. Behind Mo Cheng, all the divine kings followed him, disappearing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. After they had left, Aladona appeared several thousand kilometers away. She stared at the divine kings in the distance, and she became extremely stern. After a moment of silence, she immediately followed them. Chanlong sat in the sky by himself in the Neptunian mountains. He stared at the empty Neptunian mountains and the group of divine kings who had vanished into the distance. He sank into his thoughts. Several hundred divine kings have been mobilized this time. If they really do find Jianchen, Jianchen will probably be done for. Actually, I can completely control the power of the Neptunian mountains and trap all the divine kings here. But why didn't I do that? Chanlong murmured as confusion filled his eyes. It looks like I still haven't treated Jianchen as a friend in the depths of my heart. Perhaps I've only been with him in the past few years because of Kea, including when I risked defending the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion to help them in the Blood Sun Empire on the Cloud Plain. It was also because of Kea. Is Kea really that important to me? Why would I change my way of doing things in the past for her? But I clearly don't have any romantic feelings for her, Chanlong chuckled. Chanlong murmured. Over the past few years, this question had crossed his mind more than once. But no matter how he thought about it, he was unable to find an answer. Old man Chanlong, if I've guessed correctly, we should have a deep relationship with Kea. At this moment, the soul trapped in a formation flag emerged from Chanlong's space ring as well. It turned into a huge snake and coiled around Chanlong as it spoke sternly. Didn't you say you could see the heavenly secrets and predict the future? Then can you see what happened between me and Kea? Chanlong asked. I can indeed see the heavenly secrets and predict the future, but there are differences in the heavenly secrets as well. The ability to predict the future is extremely particular. If it's some trivial matter, I only need to think about it, and I'll be able to see it clearly. If it's something huge, let alone me, probably even those grand primes won't be able to predict it. Take Kea, for example. There's always a layer of mist around Kea. Let alone me right now. Even if I were 100 times more powerful, I wouldn't be able to see through this layer of mist. And there's Jianchen. I can't see through anything related to him either. It seems like he's even more complicated than Kea. However, I have a feeling that we can't get too close to Jianchen. Don't ask me why, because I don't know either. Powerful sword intent enveloped a mountain range on the 5th floor of the Blue Poseidon Palace. Strands of sharp sword chi shot out with resplendent light, crisscrossing the mountain range and leaving behind crisscrossing slashes. From afar, the entire mountain range seemed to have become a sea of sword chi. There were countless strands of sword chi, making it a forbidden ground that even many god kings could not set foot in. At this moment, a person covered in blood sat in a hidden cave within the mountain range. He wielded a sword and was currently refining it with all his strength. To no surprise, this person was Genshin. The artifact spirit of the god artifact was unwilling to be controlled by Genshin, who was only a divine king, so it resisted with all its strength. However, as time went on, the resistance finally weakened. In the end, Genshin bellowed out and the chaotic force within him surged, completely suppressing the sword. The sword had lost its ability to resist and was firmly suppressed. Although you've defeated me, you won't be able to truly control me until you reach the primordial realm, the artifact spirit said reluctantly. Its power began to shrink, gathering at the tip of the sword. Genshin used this opportunity to pour his chaotic force into the god artifact. In the end, it took up 2/3 of the sword, while the remaining third was controlled by the artifact spirit. There's no need for me to reach the primordial realm. Once my cultivation increases, I'll be able to refine you easily. Genshin smiled indifferently. Taming the god artifact really was difficult. If it were not for the fact that his chaotic force was endless and was consumed extremely slowly, coupled with the toughness of the chaotic body that allowed him to withstand attacks from the sword chi, he probably would not have been able to obtain the god artifact at all. However, even with that being the case, he only managed to suppress the artifact spirit and gain partial control over the god artifact. If he wanted full control, he needed to increase his cultivation and gain the recognition of the artifact spirit. So you're called the 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways. That's quite a nice name. Genshin was excited. After refining the god artifact, he had obtained some information about it. The 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways was a low-quality god artifact. It was forged from 9 stars in outer space and possessed the mysteries of the world and a sliver of the power of the heavenly ways. As a result, it was known as the 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways. It really is a god artifact after all. With my current strength, I can only use 40% of the 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways power. However, even if it's only 40%, I'm confident I can kill the 8 supreme god kings from back then. Moreover, my chaotic force is consumed very slowly, so I can use the god artifact as much as I want. I don't need to worry about the consumption of my cultivation like regular divine kings. As a result, the god artifact really is extremely helpful to me. Genshin became much more confident with the god artifact in hand. He felt like he could sweep through the world and become invincible. Moreover, there are some extremely high-quality heavenly resources in the Grand Prime Space Ring. These heavenly resources are not healing medicines. Instead, they're items that can increase cultivation. If I consume them, my chaotic Niden should be able to strengthen quite a lot, allowing me to take a step closer to the 13th layer of the chaotic body, thought Genshin. However, at this moment, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he suddenly raised his head to look outside the cave. Genshin, you sure are good at hiding. You've actually come to the 5th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. Finding you sure isn't easy. At this moment, a cold voice boomed out. Amo-chung. Genshin narrowed his eyes when he heard the familiar voice. A sharp, cold light flashed through his eyes. He was rather surprised. P.S. Please listen to Xiaoyao's prestige. Once there are any updates in the future, Xiaoyao will inform you through prestige. Search. Xingxiao 110. It was not complicated. It was Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a police number. Chapter 2198. Several hundred supreme, divine kings hovered in the air outside the cave. They formed an encirclement around the mountain where Genshin resided. Every single one of them radiated with extremely powerful presences. As a matter of fact, the presences of some of the people who ranked towards the top were truly earth-shaking, enough to cause the surroundings to change. These people were so powerful that they had basically surpassed the Divine King's domain. They were close to primordial realm experts. To no surprise, Amo-chung was among them as well. Even though he was the weakest among them, none of the Divine Kings present dared to ignore his existence. Below, Jianqin slowly emerged from the cave with the 9-star sort of heavenly ways he had just refined. He seemed composed. Mo Qing, I'm rather surprised that you're working with these people. Do you think that you have the right to compete for the Tsang Poseidon Palace with these people after breaking through to the Divine King realm? Jianqin looked at the cold Mo Cheng and said indifferently. Mo Cheng's face did not change at all. He said, the Tsang Poseidon Palace is indeed very valuable, but I'm not particularly interested in it. I've come to find you not for the Tsang Poseidon Palace, but for revenge. Revenge? Do you feel ashamed of your defeat to me back then, so you resent me because of that? Jianqin asked. Mo Cheng shook his head. His face was filled with an innate arrogance. Back then, I accepted my defeat wholeheartedly. I don't feel any hatred at all. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your friend Ming Dong for provoking a member of my Azure Peng lineage. I once heard that Ming Dong and you are best friends who have gone through life and death together. Because of that, I thought that Ming Dong would definitely come out and save you the moment your life is in danger. This time, I've come specifically to kill Ming Dong. Mo Cheng's expression was cold. He did not hide anything and directly stated his intentions. Jianqin's face changed slightly when he heard that. He did not fear these people. Even if he could not defeat them, he could use the cosmic movement talisman to flee. However, he began to worry for Ming Dong. He understood Ming Dong. He knew that once Ming Dong encountered him, Ming Dong would stand with him without any hesitation at all, becoming an enemy to the several hundred Divine King. Although he knew that Ming Dong was very powerful right now, even Aladona and Shui Yunlan could not stop the several hundred Divine Kings before him, let alone Ming Dong. At that moment, Jianqin could not help but worry for Ming Dong secretly. Ha 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 ha, even a mere early God King wants to kill me. It looks like some people still think that I, Ming Dong, am easy to bully. At this moment, a bold voice rang out from the distance. The voice was vast, echoing through the surroundings. The powerful sound waves caused the mountains to tremble. With that, 6 figures shot over from the distance with terrifying speed. A while later, they arrived in the encirclement of the several hundred Divine Kings. To no surprise, the 6 of them were Ming Dong and the 5 Divine Generals. Ha ha ha, brother, I've finally found you. As soon as he arrived, Jianqin's gaze landed on him. Immediately, his face was filled with excitement. He walked up and hugged Jianqin firmly. Ming Dong, you shouldn't have come. Jianqin seemed rather calm compared to Ming Dong's excitement. He said bitterly, they had been separated for so many years, and now that they had finally reunited in another world, it was a joyous occasion. They should have had a lot to talk about, but Jianqin struggled to be in a good mood under such circumstances. Why shouldn't I have come? Let alone the fact that these people are only Divine Kings. Even if you run into the pursuit of infinite primes, chaotic primes, or even grand primes, I still won't back down. I'll stand forward without any hesitation to fight alongside you and kill your enemies, Ming Dong said boldly. Afterwards, he looked at the several hundred Divine Kings in the surroundings and said coldly, listen up. Jianqin is my sworn brother. If you dare to oppose Jianqin, you'll be my enemy. The expressions of the few supreme God Kings, who roughly knew Ming Dong's identity, changed slightly when they heard that. They became hesitant and hesitant. However, even more people did not know about Ming Dong's background. Even though they could guess that the force behind Ming Dong was very powerful, how many of the Divine Kings present were ordinary people? As a result, they completely scoffed at Ming Dong's threat. They did not take it seriously at all. Ming Dong, we can turn a blind eye to your actions on the 8th floor, but this is related to the ownership of the Azure Poseidon Palace, a high-quality god artifact. If you forcefully stick your head out, you'll only cause trouble for yourself. Jianqin, hand over the girl, and we'll spare your life. The person who gained the recognition of the Grand Prime statue on the 12th floor died to his hands as well. Jianqin, hand over the space ring, and we won't make things difficult for you, and the god artifact in your hand. You should have obtained it from there as well. Hand it over as well. Many divine kings in the surroundings called out. Clearly, Ming Dong's threat did not have much of an effect. It's you! How dare you appear here? Suddenly, a furious bellow rang out. Immediately, killing intent filled the surroundings. Many divine kings radiated with heavy killing intent at that moment. The green-clothed Adriana flew over unhurriedly. Her arrival immediately attracted the gazes of many divine kings. She's with the person who uses the laws of ice. In order to stop us from pursuing Jianqin, the person injured many of us. As a result, we can't spare this woman. Yeah, we can't spare her no matter what, many divine kings bellowed out furiously. They were filled with resentment. Aladona arrived beside Jianqin at ease and said, I am Aladona from the God Clan. If I have offended you before, please forgive me. What, the God Clan? The expressions of all the divine kings present changed when they heard her mention the God Clan. Even the divine kings who wanted to kill Aladona shut their mouths obediently. The God Clan was known as the greatest clan in the Saints' world in the past. They were the undisputed greatest organization in the Saints' world. They stood proudly and shook up the entire world. No one dared to offend them. Even with the death of the war god of the God Clan, which had greatly weakened the God Clan, they were still one of the most powerful organizations in the Saints' world. Their heritage was unimaginable. Jianqin is the friend of the esteemed war god of our God Clan. I left the God Clan this time under the orders of the war god to find Jianqin. Everyone, you should consider the consequences of becoming enemies with Jianqin. Aladona clasped her hands and said. Everyone present was surprised when they heard that. Their gazes towards Jianqin were filled with mixed feelings. There was envy, jealousy, and resentment. There's no point in saying anything more. We've only come for the girl. If you hand her over, nothing will happen. Otherwise, even if Jianqin has the support of the God Clan, he won't be able to leave here. An imposing and arrogant young man stood forward and said coldly. He did not fear the God Clan at all. With that, the young man stared at Aladona coldly. His presence was earth-shaking as he said coldly, I am Nan Shangyun from the Heaven-Splitting Clan. Does your God Clan want to fall out with our Heaven-Splitting Clan over a mere divine king? Chapter 2199. Over 3 million years ago, your Heaven-Splitting Clan was only a small clan in the eyes of our God Clan. It was nothing in the Saints' world. Do you really think that your Heaven-Splitting Clan can stand up to our God Clan and oppose our Supreme War God just because you have a Heaven-Splitting ancestor now? Aladona growled as her gaze became extremely piercing. That was then, and this is now. The Heaven-Splitting Clan was indeed nothing in the eyes of the God Clan, the greatest clan in the Saints' world. But now the ancestor of our Heaven-Splitting Clan has already become one of the most powerful people below Grand Exalt. Just the ancestor alone can stand up to your God Clan. The current God Clan is no longer the God Clan of the past. As for the war god of your God Clan, he's just too weak right now. He'll need quite some time before he truly matures. By then, our ancestor might have broken through the final bottleneck and become a Grand Exalt. Why would we fear your God Clan then? Nan Shangyun said arrogantly. The current Heaven-Splitting Clan did indeed possess the right to look down on everything. Aladona's face sank. She knew that Nan Shangyun was telling the truth. The ancestor of the Heaven-Splitting Clan possessed unprecedented talent. If there was anyone in the current Saints world who was most likely to take the final step and become a Grand Exalt, the Heaven-Splitting ancestor would definitely be one of them. Ha ha ha. Nan Shangyun, aren't you overestimating yourself too much? Your Heaven-Splitting Clan is powerful. But what does that have to do with you? Do you really think the Heaven-Splitting Clan is willing to wage war against the renowned God Clan for a mere divine king like you? Say, Nan Shangyun, aren't you overestimating yourself too much? Do you really have that much authority? At this moment, Ming Dong, who stood beside Jianqin, spoke up. He stared at Nan Shangyun mockingly as his words were filled with mockery. Ming Dong, do you want to die? Nan Shangyun swept his sharp gaze towards Ming Dong. His face was dark, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Ming Dong laughed aloud. He directly took out his god artifact and put on his god artifact, charging towards Nan Shangyun aggressively. He sneered, "You're the one who's looking to die. Today, I'll cripple you before everyone. Let's see if your heaven-splitting clan is as powerful as you say it is. Let's see if you're bold enough to seek revenge for me." Ming Dong struck out with his full strength right from the start. The god artifact contained the pure laws of destruction, and it shot out several hundred meters of sword chi. With the might of a god-tier battle skill, it slashed towards Nan Shangyun mercilessly. How arrogant! Just because of what you said today, I will not allow you to leave the Blue Poseidon Palace alive, Nan Shangyun shouted coldly. He gripped a violet gold hammer and smashed it with the might of a god artifact. Nan Shangyun comprehended the laws of strength. With a swing of his hammer, he could split apart the world. The terrifying power condensed on the hammer caused the space around it to ripple. Thunderous booms erupted in the sky. Nan Shangyun was extremely powerful. He was extremely close to the top 10 of the Divine King, so he suppressed Ming Dong in their first clash. The Grand Tao is in the heavens! At this moment, Ming Dong roared out. He pointed a finger at the sky and a finger at the ground as a mysterious power radiated from him. I am in the heavens and earth. In the next moment, Ming Dong's hands moved in strange and profound trajectories. He resonated with the world and fused with the Grand Tao. He shone with a hazy light. Nan Shangyun's eyes narrowed. A sliver of seriousness flashed through his eyes as he looked at Ming Dong. Ever since Ming Dong began using the mysterious secret technique, he had developed an intense sense of uneasiness in his heart. Mixed with this was a great fear that seemed to originate from the depths of his soul. It was as if the secret technique that Ming Dong was using right now was extremely impressive. It possessed unfathomable power. Nan Shangyun gritted his teeth and no longer held back. The violet golden hammer in his hand was enveloped by the laws of strength as he used a god-tier battle skill. He wanted to interrupt Ming Dong's secret technique. I am the heavenly way. It was also at this moment that Ming Dong suddenly bellowed out. His voice was like thunder, shaking up the surroundings. A profound and mysterious power radiated from him, enveloping Nan Shangyun. Nan Shangyun's face suddenly changed. Under the mysterious power, he was actually unable to sense his cultivation at all, nor was he able to sense his comprehension of laws. It was as if he had been forcefully struck down from the Divine King to the mortal world in that moment, becoming the most ordinary of mortals. Even his low-quality god artifact, the violet golden hammer, was affected at that moment. It dimmed, and the god-tier battle skill he used dispersed as well, vanishing without a trace. What secret technique is this? Nan Shangyun cried out. His voice was filled with panic. Even his face was filled with extreme fear. However, in the next moment, Nan Shangyun let out an extremely miserable shriek. The mysterious power invaded his soul and body, causing unbearable pain to spread throughout his body. Moreover, his soul rapidly dispersed under the infiltration of the mysterious power. His cultivation rapidly vanished as well. This was a permanent loss. It was very difficult to make up for it. It would directly cause his cultivation and comprehension of laws to plummet. In just 3 seconds, the mysterious power around Ming Dong dispersed. The dense light around him vanished as well, revealing Ming Dong's pale face. Opposite him was the dispirited Nan Shangyun. His eyes were lifeless, and his face was filled with disbelief and shock. Mixed within that was also a deep sense of fear. Now he could indeed sense the power of his soul and cultivation once again. However, his cultivation was completely gone, falling between the origin realm and deity realm. His peak god king soul seemed to have been ripped apart, as well, where only a small portion remained. He had fallen to early deity. This was a permanent loss. It was impossible to make up for it. He could only slowly cultivate if he wanted to recover. Moreover, due to the wounds to his soul, it would be difficult for him to return to his peak condition even if he cultivated again. Nan Shangyun of the Heaven-Splitting Clan could be said to be completely crippled now that he had been reduced to such a state. Remember, I'm Ming Dong. Don't forget to get the people of your Heaven-Splitting Clan to come find me for revenge, Ming Dong said weakly. Ming Dong's face was pale as he said, weakly. Then he kicked Nan Shangyun far away. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone stared blankly at Nan Shangyun, whose aura had withered and whose cultivation had dropped. Waves of shock surged in their hearts. Ming Dong's secret technique had actually forcefully reduced a peak Divine King expert to a deity. They had never seen or heard of such a terrifying and strange secret technique before. What shocked them even more was that Nan Shangyun had actually been crippled by Ming Dong in front of so many people. This was a member of the Heaven-Splitting Clan. The Heaven-Splitting Clan was like the midday sun right now. Across the entire Saints world, there were very few organizations that dared to stand up to the Heaven-Splitting Clan. Yet Ming Dong did not fear them at all. The laws of the Grand Exalt. How does he know the laws of the Grand Exalt? Aladona stared at Ming Dong with mixed feelings from nearby as her heart churned. How is this possible? How can Ming Dong know the laws of the Grand Exalt? Grasping this technique requires the recognition of a Grand Exalt and the Grand Exalt to pass it on personally. However, from a certain perspective, anyone who grasps this technique is a successor of a Grand Exalt because every time a Grand Exalt passes on the technique to someone else, it will cause a certain amount of damage to their body. Several dozen kilometers away, the empty space actually pulsed slightly. Shui Yunlan, who was hidden in the space, said in shock. Out of the several hundred supreme divine king present, probably only Aladona and Shui Yunlan knew about Ming Dong's secret technique. This was because one of them came from the God clan, while the other came from the Ice Goddess Hall. They were both peak organizations that had Grand Exalts in the past, so they naturally possessed some records. However, at this moment, something happened. A huge hand appeared above Genshin's head out of nowhere. It shone with golden light and reached towards Genshin with a suffocating pressure. Chapter 2200. Genshin shivered inside as he became extremely stern. When the golden hand reached over, his body suddenly sank as well. He felt the space around him freeze up at that moment. The owner of the golden hand was extremely powerful. At that moment, Genshin truly felt like he was suffocating. However, he did not panic at all. Now that he possessed a god artifact, his battle prowess had increased drastically. Even if he was not as powerful as his opponent, he would not be suppressed to the point where he could not fight back at all. His eyes shone brightly. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as the chaotic force within him surged and surged wildly, pouring into the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. Immediately, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone with dazzling starlight. Vaguely, it seemed like 4 colossal stars had appeared. Genshin pointed his sword at the sky. Immediately, the incomparable might of a god artifact radiated from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, colliding with the golden hand with the power of stars. Boom! The collision produced a deafening sound. It was like 2 worlds had collided violently, kicking up powerful streams of energy. Genshin pointed his sword at the sky. He stood tall and his presence surged. He seemed like an undefeatable god of war. The ground beneath Genshin began to crack. His body sank slowly, and his legs had already sunk into the ground. He stopped when he reached his knees. Above his head, the golden hand possessed tremendous and terrifying power. Only after remaining in a stalemate with the 9-star sword of heavenly ways for a while did it disperse due to exhaustion. The sneak attack of the golden hand had officially kicked off the curtain of an intense battle. Immediately, the supreme divine king gathered there all struck out. Without any exception, all of them looked at Jianchen. A gleam of light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. He stared at the golden hand that had already dispersed and became surprised and doubtful. There was also a sliver of excitement on his face. He could sense a familiar aura from the golden hand that had just attacked him. This aura was extremely similar to divine golden dragon Ruijian's. "Whoever dares to hurt my brother will be my enemy." Ming Dong roared furiously, his killing intent soaring into the sky. He consumed a divine tear healing pill and attacked with all his might, blocking in front of Jianchen. However, after using the Grand Exalt's law of the Grand Exalt, Ming Dong had expended too much energy. He had paid a certain price as well, so he was no longer at his peak. How could he stop so many peerless Divine King? However, the Supreme Divine King did not dare to act viciously against Ming Dong. After all of them had witnessed Ming Dong's arrogance. He did not even possess the heaven-splitting clan, so his confidence naturally made many of them fear him. As for the few Supreme Divine King who knew Ming Dong's identity, they all stayed far away from Jianchen when they charged at him. They did not dare to brush past him at all. "Ming Dong, I don't care what your identity is or what your background is. I'll make you regret it today. The people of my Azure Peng lineage can't be offended so easily, even if you're just a servant." At the same time, killing intent surged in Mo Cheng's eyes as he stared at Ming Dong. He called out, "Do it!" "Young Master Mo Cheng, this Ming Dong's origins are probably quite impressive. Do you really want to do this?" Nearby, several Supreme Divine King hesitated. They all came from different clans and organizations in the Saints' world. They had been secretly contacted by Mo Cheng, who wanted to borrow their strength to kill Ming Dong. Although the Supreme Divine King knew that Ming Dong's background was extraordinary, they did not think that it was too terrifying. Moreover, when they thought about how Mo Cheng was the disciple of the Azure Peng King and how his talent was extraordinary, they firmly agreed to Mo Cheng's suggestion in order to establish good relations with him. Only when they saw how Ming Dong did not even have a heaven-splitting clan did they reevaluate Ming Dong's background. As a result, they all hesitated slightly. "Do as you please," Mo Cheng called out coldly. The Supreme Divine King looked at one another before gritting their teeth. They struck out decisively, surging with killing intent as they charged towards Ming Dong. "How dare you!" The 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing were furious. Before they could approach Ming Dong, they stopped them, and the two sides engaged in an intense battle. A vicious light flashed through Mo Cheng's eyes when he saw how his helpers had been stopped. He took action personally. He wielded a sword as he used the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction at the same time, directly killing his way towards Ming Dong. He could already see that Ming Dong was extremely weak. His battle prowess was nowhere close to his peak condition, so he was confident that he could put up a fight. After all, Mo Cheng was no regular Divine King. When he was still an over-god, he already possessed the ability to kill a Divine King, let alone now. "Young Master, I have come to assist you." Song Ying flew over from afar as well. He flickered with azure light as he turned into an azure Peng, charging towards Ming Dong with great speed. "You want to kill me with just you?" Ming Dong snorted coldly. His face was cold as killing intent surged. The laws of destruction erupted as he slashed out with his god artifact, sending Mo Cheng flying while vomiting blood. At the same time, Ming Dong shuddered. Song Ying's hands turned into claws as he grabbed Ming Dong's god artifact armor with azure light. Ming Dong was protected by the god artifact armor, so Song Ying's attack failed to deal any substantial damage to him. He slashed out with the back of his hand, and with the might of a god-tier battle skill, it turned into a black streak of light and cleaved Song Ying in half. The 5 divine generals were furious when they saw Ming Dong get attacked. Killing intent surged from them, and 5 sets of divine armor flickered with golden light as they were enveloped by dazzling light. They covered their entire bodies, leaving only their eyes exposed. They used their full strength to force back their opponents. They did not linger in the battle any longer, returning to Mingdong's side in a flash. They used their bodies to create a tough fortress, protecting Mingdong. This is the standard armor of the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Why, you're actually... In the surroundings, the divine kings who had fought against the 5 divine generals earlier all widened their eyes. They stared at the golden armor on them as shock filled their faces. They all pulled back, no longer daring to attack again. They're actually divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. How is this possible? Why have the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing come to the Azure Poseidon Palace? Heavens, who is that Mingdong? Why is he protected by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing? A series of gasps rang out in the surroundings. At that moment, many people were shocked. Disbelief filled their faces. At the same time, they came to a realization. No wonder Mingdong was so arrogant, not even fearing the heaven-splitting clan. As it turned out, he actually came from the heavenly palace of Bishing. Yugu. Song-Ying, whose body had been cut in half by Mingdong, paled. His face was filled with fear. He had truly been frightened by the revelation of the 5 divine generals' identities. A tree of life appeared in the center of the battlefield. Aladona struck out as soon as possible, helping Jianqin fend off the enemies in the surroundings. However, Jianqin refused to back down. Even though he was surrounded by enemies, his battle intent surged. He wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways as he constantly channeled chaotic force into it, fighting against the many divine kings. However, how could the 2 of them fend off so many divine kings? For a moment, both Aladona and Jianqin were firmly suppressed. They were forced into an extremely passive position, completely losing the upper hand. Chapter 2201. Jianqin, hand over the girl, and we won't become your enemy. Jianqin, you can't keep her. Hand over the girl. For the sake of the heavenly palace of Bishing, we won't target you. A few divine kings called out in the surroundings. They were unwilling to fall out with the heavenly palace of Bishing over a single Jianqin. However, they were determined to obtain the girl, so they could not give up. At this moment, a simple cauldron flew over. It shone with a bronze light and arrived above Jianqin's head. It swallowed everything in an attempt to swallow Jianqin. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes when he saw the cauldron. He did not resist at all, allowing the cauldron to swallow him. The cauldron immediately fled after sucking in Jianqin. However, the divine kings in the surroundings all bellowed out furiously. Many terrifying attacks from the divine kings landed on the cauldron. The cauldron's light dimmed amidst the surging booms. Like a rubber ball, it was knocked around by the attacks from the divine kings in the surroundings. Some of the divine kings even used god artifacts to strike the cauldron with terrifying power, erupting with thunderous booms. The cauldron was also a divine king. It was not something that the divine kings could destroy. It remained unscathed even after taking on attacks from so many supreme divine kings. However, the person controlling the cauldron was clearly unable to unleash its full power. In the end, the cauldron was sent flying far away. On its way, it broke countless mountain peaks. Rolling boulders filled the sky, and dust covered the sky. As Jianqin had been sucked away by the cauldron naturally became the target of all the divine kings. After the cauldron dimmed from the attacks of the divine kings, where it was basically powerless to escape, the several hundred divine kings in the surroundings shot out as well, flying towards the cauldron as quickly as they could. Aladona took action as well. She hovered in the air as her life force surged, conjuring a huge, ancient tree that was several thousand meters tall. Countless branches shot out with emerald light, sweeping past the divine kings and towards the cauldron. Powerful energy with laws on the level of divine kings shook up the air. Over a dozen divine kings struck out decisively, severing all the branches that swept towards the cauldron. Do you want to be like the heaven-splitting clan and become enemies with our god race? Jianqin is someone the supreme war god of the god race wants to protect. Aladona called out sternly. Her eyes were cold. Clearly, she was truly angered. We naturally wouldn't dare to become enemies with the god race. We're only doing this for the girl. In reality, a battle like this is just child's play in the eyes of the older generation. Why would it escalate to something as major as the relationship between the two races? Replied a divine king. Although he feared the god race, he still would not let go of the azure Poseidon palace. At this moment, a divine king arrived before the cauldron. His eyes shone with burning desire and excitement as he extended his hand towards the cauldron. However, as soon as he moved, all the divine kings in the surroundings attacked him at the same time. In just a single instance, the powerful divine king who had approached the cauldron was heavily injured. His life hung by a thread as he directly fell out of the sky. Artifact spirit, quick, take Jianqin and leave this place. Leave this place as quickly as possible. At the same time, a skinny old man frantically communicated with the artifact spirit in the crowd. This old man was also a divine king under the divine king. The cauldron that enveloped Jianqin came from him. Unfortunately, the power he could unleash with the god artifact as a god king was very limited. He could possess an absolute advantage in a one-on-one battle, but against several hundred supreme god kings, he was powerless. He was powerless, so he could only remain in an extremely passive situation. In particular, he no longer possessed the power to control the god artifact. He could only leave everything to the artifact spirit. Unfortunately, although the cauldron was a god artifact, it had lost its master's control and its source of energy. Even if it could remain tough through its material and toughness, it could only take a beating before several hundred supreme overgods. It was unable to escape. The golden hand appeared once again, shining with golden light. The pressure it gave off was extremely great, even greater than when it attacked Jianqin. It had basically surpassed the divine king and reached the primordial realm. As the supreme god kings hurried over, the golden hand grabbed the cauldron firmly. So powerful. This person must have made it into the top 10 of the divine king's throne. Many divine kings shivered inside when they sensed the suffocating feeling from the golden hand in the surroundings. It was also at this moment that a cold snort rang out. It was not loud, but it drowned out the deafening sounds from the clashes of energy. A silver-haired young man dressed in a white robe, looking valiant and extraordinary. He held a 3-foot-long spear in his hand as he strode forward. He became one with the spear and pierced towards the golden hand. Immediately, there was a flash of lightning. When the silver-haired young man stabbed out with his spear, countless bolts of lightning shot out from his body as if he had turned into a huge bolt of lightning. He moved extremely quickly. Boom! With a great sound, the golden hand directly dispersed from the silver-haired young man's lightning-like strike. It turned into violent ripples of energy that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. As for the silver-haired young man with the long spear, with a flick of his long spear, the long spear pierced through the 2 handles of the large cauldron, firmly locking it in place and then grasping it in his hand. It was also at this moment that the powerful attacks from the divine kings around released powerful energy ripples, sealing off all of the silver-haired young man's paths of retreat. The silver-haired young man's expression did not change. Lightning flickered around his body as he swept out with his spear, destroying several attacks that approached him. Then, as if he had turned into lightning, he displayed lightning-like speed as he moved through the gaps between the attacks and calmly appeared outside. Lei Daozi, it won't be so easy to take something from me. However, just when the silver-haired young man was about to flee, a burly man that was over 3 meters tall blocked his path. The burly man was expressionless, and his gaze was cold. His entire body shone with dazzling golden light as he directly threw out a punch. The force behind the punch was terrifying and shocking, causing circles of ripples to appear in space. Lei Daozi, The Deity who is ranked 6th under the Divine King? That silver-haired young man is Deity? He's a terrifying existence who is ranked in the top 10 under the Divine King's throne. Hearing the name Deity, cries of surprise rang out from all around. Daity's expression did not change, but his eyes suddenly turned silver-white, as if they contained the power of lightning. Boundless lightning flashed through his eyes, and his entire body turned into a bolt of lightning as he punched out with unparalleled speed. The golden fist collided with the lightning, and it was as if 2 comets had collided. A deafening boom rang out as they exploded with destructive power. Terrifying shockwaves of energy wreaked havoc, causing some of the lower-ranked Divine Kings to be unable to move forward. After that attack, Daity's body trembled as he could not help but retreat a few steps. Lightning flickered on his body as it jumped around, making crackling sounds. Opposite him, the 3-meter-tall burly man was bathed in a layer of golden light. He grabbed the large cauldron that he had taken from Deity and quickly flew away. Deity, do you think you can escape in front of me, Deity? No matter how fast you are, can you be faster than my lightning? Deity coldly snorted as he turned into lightning and quickly chased after Deity. He only needed to stall Deity. No matter how strong Deity was, in front of hundreds of Divine Kings. Even if Deity was defeated, he would still be powerless. P.S. This is the first chapter. Xiaoyao will continue to write. There is still a second chapter, but it will be a bit late. In addition, at the bottom of Xiaoyao's public account there was a notice. Brothers, please help Xiaoyao click on it every day. To be honest, the author would receive advertising revenue if they clicked on this. A single click from a reader was equivalent to the revenue of a VIP chapter. After accumulating this revenue, Xiaoyao would hold red packet snatching activities from time to time to give back to the readers. Xiaoyao knew that many readers had been reading the free pirated version, and Xiaoyao could understand their difficulties. But now the opportunity to support the Chaos Sword God had come. Spend 30 seconds every day to gently click on it to prove your feelings for the Chaos Sword God. Chapter 2202. When Deity mentioned Daity's name, all the Divine King in the surroundings immediately shuddered. They were not unfamiliar with the name Deity because it ranked 4th on the Divine King's throne. This ranking was an extremely supreme existence in the eyes of many Divine Kings. Deity, do you think you still have time to chase after Deity with me here? A gentle chuckle rang out. An extremely beautiful woman in her 20s blocked Daity's path. Milky white flames burned around her as she engaged in a battle with Deity. On the other side, Mingdong was infuriated. Ignoring his feebleness, he burned his essence blood and used a secret technique to chase after Deity with the 5 divine generals. He growled at the 5 divine generals beside him viciously. No matter what, we can't let him take my brother away from here. Otherwise, with that person's strength, my brother will probably be done for. I don't care how great of a price you have to pay. You have to stop that person, save my brother, and take back the cauldron. As long as the cauldron is in my hands, I'd like to see who's bold enough to take it from me. Mingdong's voice was rather hoarse. At that moment, he was extremely furious. In particular, when he saw so many Divine Kings trying to take away Jianqin. Killing intent surged in his chest. Yes, 9th Majesty. The 5 divine generals replied together. Although they also possessed the strength of a Divine King, they were extremely respectful towards Mingdong. Frankly speaking, the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing were equivalent to guards. However, every single one of the 9 majesties possessed extremely great statuses in the heavenly palace of Bixing. They were existences only second to the master of the heavenly palace of Bixing, the Nata, Grand Exalt. As a result, any majesty could directly order them around regardless of their strength. The 5 divine generals looked at each other, their eyes filled with determination. They were divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing. Every single one of them had been nurtured by the heavenly palace of Bishing. Whether it was the battle skills, secret techniques, or cultivation methods they possessed, they were enough to make many supreme divine kings envious. As a result, even though Rue Di was powerful, it was not impossible for them to fend him off when they worked together. As for Ming Dong's safety, ever since their identities were exposed, all the supreme divine king present had distanced themselves from Ming Dong. None of them dared to make him an enemy. Even if they wanted to stop Ming Dong, they did not dare to directly kill him without any fear like before. Ming Dong's identity as the Ninth Majesty had not been exposed yet. Everyone could only tell that Ming Dong was connected to the heavenly palace of Bishing from the 5 divine generals. Apart from Aladona and Shui Yunlan, no one could guess the exact relationship. Even so, no one dared to offend Ming Dong. However, just when the 5 divine generals were about to use their forbidden techniques, a terrifying stream of coldness suddenly swept over, causing the temperature in the surroundings to plummet. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with snow, and the ground was covered in frost. The mountains and rivers were reduced to a world of ice in a single moment. In the direction where Reed had fled, a figure that seemed to have blended into the snow appeared out of thin air. She was wearing a silver-white armor that covered her entire body tightly. Only a pair of eyes that were filled with a cold light were exposed. At this moment, Shui Yunlan, who had always remained hidden, took action as well. She stared at Rue Di coldly with her motionless eyes as she extended a finger towards him gently. With that, the space around Rue Di actually froze at an unbelievable rate, frozen by an extremely terrifying coldness. At the same time, the coldness rapidly spread towards Rue Di at an unstoppable rate. It wanted to freeze his blood, freeze his soul, and seal up his cultivation. Rue Di's face changed, as if he was facing a great enemy. He bellowed out, and golden light surged into the air around him, as if he had turned into a scorching sun, shining with blinding light. Terrifying ripples of energy erupted like a tsunami. He threw a punch, vicious and brutal, shattering the powerful coldness that permeated the surroundings and heading straight for Shui Yunlan. It had to be mentioned that Rue Di was extremely powerful. Just the might of his punch was devastating. He could truly reign supreme in the Divine King's realm. He could completely rival those who had just reached the primordial realm. As for Shui Yunlan, she seemed extremely frail, but she was extremely indifferent when she faced Rue Di's punch. Her slender fingers were covered in coldness as she sent out a palm strike gently, colliding with Rue Di's fist. The clash this time was neither intense nor intense. The terrifying power within Rue Di's punch was actually directly frozen by Shui Yunlan's coldness. Moreover, the coldness spread towards Rue Di's arm at an unbelievable rate, enveloping his entire body in a single instant. His entire body was covered in a thin layer of ice. Rue Di's face suddenly changed, becoming filled with shock. With a furious bellow, his body rapidly swelled up, bursting through the ice and turning into a huge golden dragon that was several hundred meters long. His scales flickered with golden light. However, during this short clash, the cauldron that Rue Di had obtained had already ended up in Shui Yunlan's hands. Shui Yunlan held the cauldron in one hand as she looked at Rue Di, who had turned into a golden dragon. Her eyes narrowed slightly before she immediately left with the cauldron. She's so powerful. Rue Di can't even last a few rounds against her. I'll go stop her. Follow me immediately. Lei Daozi's eyes suddenly narrowed as well. He was stern, and as lightning flickered around him, he turned into a bolt of lightning as he chased after Shui Yunlan rapidly. When the woman bathed in white flames saw how Shui Yunlan had taken away the cauldron, she obviously did not continue to stop Lei Daozi. She followed closely behind Lei Daozi, pursuing him with Rue Di, who had transformed into a golden dragon. Shui Yunlan was very fast, but before Lei Daozi, who possessed an absolute advantage in laws, she was still quite slow. She was intercepted by Lei Daozi. "You're asking for death." Shui Yunlan's eyes were extremely cold as killing intent filled them. With a flip of her hand, a fist-sized orb appeared. It gave off the pulses of a god artifact, and under Shui Yunlan's control, an extremely terrifying coldness surged out from the orb, enveloping Lei Daozi. As soon as Lei Daozi caught up to Shui Yunlan, before he could even do anything, he was frozen into an ice statue by the terrifying coldness from the orb in the blink of an eye. The coldness was just too terrifying. It was undodgeable. Even though Lei Daozi was a supreme divine king who ranked 6th among the divine kings, even though he wore a god artifact armor, he was still unable to resist it. He could not even last for a single moment. In the blink of an eye, he was frozen into a living statue. Lei Daozi's eyes narrowed as shock filled them. He discovered that the woman's strength was so terrifying that it had completely exceeded his expectations. At that moment, he even began to suspect that his opponent was not a divine king, but a primordial realm expert. Moreover, she was a primordial realm expert with extraordinary strength. Bang! With a thud, Shui Yunlan used the god artifact again. The orb in her hand immediately struck Lei Daozi. Immediately, Lei Daozi, who had been frozen into an ice sculpture, shattered. His body shattered into countless pieces and fell from the sky with a pile of ice crystals. Only the armor and spear on his body remained intact. Chapter 2203. Lei Daozi's soul hovered in the air as he stared at Shui Yunlan in shock. He had already lost his body. Shui Yunlan had used the god artifact pearl in her hand to break through the protection of Lei Daozi's god artifact armor and destroy his body. If it were not for the god artifact armor on Lei Daozi, he probably would not have just lost his body. Even his soul would have been destroyed. Lei Daozi was terrified. He looked at the divine king who rapidly approached him from behind, and he no longer dared to stay. He used his soul to control the god artifact armor to protect himself and the 10-meter-long spear, leaving as quickly as he could. Lei Daozi's fate stunned all the supreme, divine king behind him. Quite a few of them looked at Shui Yunlan in fear. Lei Daozi was the supreme expert who ranked 7th under the divine king. Yet he had almost been slain on the spot. This filled them with dread. During this moment of delay, Di, who had turned into a golden dragon, and the woman bathed in white flames caught up as well. The two of them fought Shui Yunlan together, fighting over the cauldron in her hands. At the same time, all the supreme divine king responded to the situation from behind. Some of the people who believed they were powerful and were rather confident in themselves caught up aggressively. There were also some people who scattered, forming a circle around Shui Yunlan in an attempt to trap her and stop her from leaving with the cauldron. Shui Yunlan was indeed very powerful. In a solo fight, there were not a lot of people who were her opponent. The divine king gathered here right now were all dragons among men. Every single one of them was an outstanding figure who had reached that level of cultivation. The cultivation methods they practiced were all extraordinary. Some of them even possessed god artifacts and god-tier battle skills. Their battle prowess was extraordinary. Once they worked together, Shui Yunlan would only be forced to retreat no matter how powerful she was. Riches came from danger. Along the way, they had all deeply understood this principle. As a result, even though the supreme divine king feared Shui Yunlan, they did not back away from the temptation of the Azure Poseidon Palace. A sliver of sternness appeared in Shui Yunlan's cold eyes. She looked at Di, who had trapped her, and the woman bathed in milky white flames, and the light in her eyes flickered. Afterwards, she formed a seal with her hands in front of her chest, forming a seal. Immediately, an even more intense coldness radiated from Shui Yunlan. A huge mountain of ice appeared above her head. It was vast and majestic, descending from the sky with a power that seemed like it could crush the world, crushing down on Di and Yi Qingyu. Di, who had turned into a huge golden dragon, and the woman bathed in white flames became extremely stern. They could tell with a single glance that the Mountain of Ice was a god-tier battle skill that Shui Yunlan had used. It possessed the might of the ways of the world. Under the envelopment of the Mountain of Ice, the two of them seemed to be trapped, unable to dodge. They could only take it head-on. At this moment, a high-pitched phoenix's cry rang out. The woman bathed in white flames turned into a colossal phoenix in a single instance. Flames surged around her, and as they burned, she gave off terrifying heat. The golden divine dragon, Rue Di, also produced a resonant dragon's roar, which echoed through the surroundings. Golden light surged around him as every single scale on his body flickered with light, possessing powerful pulses of energy. He struck out with the fire phoenix beside him, using a god-tier battle skill against the Mountain of Ice as well. Boom! Boom! With a thunderous boom, Rue Di and the fire phoenix's god-tier battle skills landed on the Mountain of Ice, but they advanced, causing the Mountain of Ice to tremble slightly. However, the Mountain of Ice did not slow down at all. It fell from the sky with a tremendous and terrifying might, suppressing the surroundings. Suppress! Shui Yunlan bellowed out, and with a heavy rumble, the ice mountain crushed down on the dragon and wind that were several hundred meters long. The entire ground shook, and even the sky changed in color. This scene was truly earth-shattering. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Crack! At the same time, cracks spread across the Mountain of Ice. The dragon and wind were both very powerful, especially the fire phoenix. She had even comprehended the laws of fire, which just happened to counter the laws of ice. The Mountain of Ice could only last a few seconds against them. If you come from a place called the Beast God Continent in the lower world, then don't fight with me. Jianqin is acquainted with your people. I'm saving Jianqin by doing this, Shui Yunlan said to the Mountain of Ice under the Mountain of Ice. Shui Yunlan communicated secretly to the dragon, and wind suppressed under the ice mountain. Afterwards, without any hesitation, she flew off into the distance with the cauldron in one hand. At the same time, the ice that was suppressing Rue Di and the other man also burst apart amidst a loud bang. Countless ice shards shot out in all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers. Rue Di and the fire phoenix had already broken free, but they did not pursue Shui Yunlan after breaking free. Instead, they stood where they were and stared at Shui Yunlan with widened eyes. Shock and disbelief filled their faces. The Beast God Continent? I have indeed heard from an elder in the clan that our sect of dragons and phoenixes does come from a place called the Beast God Continent in the lower world. But this is something only those with a certain status in our sect of dragons and phoenixes know. How did she know? The fire phoenix burned with flames, radiating with terrifying heat. Many divine kings in the surroundings dared not approach her. They were all confused. The Beast God Continent is the homeland of our sect of dragons and phoenixes. Does this person come from our homeland as well? She even said something about Jianqin being acquainted with our clansmen. What's going on? The golden divine dragon Rue Di was confused as well. He was at a loss. Ji, let's go. We have to get to the bottom of this. If she really is from our homeland, I've only learnt a little about our homeland from a few elders. Now that so much time has passed, I wonder how our homeland is doing. That's the ancestral ground of our sect of dragons and phoenixes, said Rue Di. It's said that there's another Tianyuan continent there. Ji murmured with mixed feelings. She immediately pursued with Rue Di. Up ahead, Shui Yunlan did not manage to escape. Instead, she was stopped once again. She was currently engaged in a battle with 3 divine kings. Out of the 3 people fighting against Shui Yunlan, one of them was extremely powerful. He comprehended the laws of the way of the sword, wielded a divine sword, and wore divine armor. Every single move he made was filled with the power of the way of the sword. He was much more powerful than Rue Di. Although it was 3 against 1, this person was actually able to take on Shui Yunlan in an open battle. Chapter 2204. The third person was shrouded in a large cloak, obscuring his face. He gave off a sense of mystery. He comprehended the laws of illusions, so his body existed between illusion and reality, constantly alternating between reality and illusion. He was very difficult to deal with. When this person fought against Shui Yunlan, from the hands that were exposed from time to time, it could be clearly seen that they were a pair of terrifying hands that were extremely pale, basically skin and bones. Their fingers were long and slender like claws. The 3 of them were extremely powerful. Every single one of them was on par with primordial realm experts. They did not pale in comparison to Shui Yunlan. Now, with the 3 of them working together, their battle against Shui Yunlan was devastating. Every single move they used erupted with devastating power, and the shock waves of energy were like a tsunami. Originally, I thought that apart from that monstrous Aoyama, there was no one else who was my opponent in the Divine King's realm. I never thought that I would actually come across such a powerful opponent in the Azure Poseidon Palace today. I wonder if I, Zhu Wen, have the right to know your name? The sword-wielding man who comprehended the laws of the sword said sternly from the 3 people fighting Shui Yunlan, although he said that his attacks did not stop or slow down at all. His sword qi was like a river of stars, resplendent like a waterfall. It was extremely sharp and extraordinarily powerful. That person is actually Zhu Wen. No wonder he's so powerful. Zhu Wen is a legendary figure who ranks second below the Divine King, only second to Aoyama. However, the woman with the laws of ice is actually no weaker than Zhu Wen. Moreover, she's fighting against the 3 of them alone, fighting against Zhu Wen and the other 2, who clearly rank in the top 10. Who is she? Don't tell me she is a primordial realm expert whose cultivation has fallen to the Divine Kings. Or is she the reincarnation of a sovereign who stands at the very apex? Otherwise, how can she be so powerful? Many people became curious about Shui Yunlan's identity. They all guessed inside. Shui Yunlan did not reply. Her personality was just like the laws she grasped. It was extremely cold, like an iceberg that never melted. At this moment, the peerless Divine King, who was shrouded in a cloak and had comprehended the law of illusion, let out a strange laugh. He said in an old and hoarse voice, "This old man is Sheng Man, ranked 7th on the Divine King's throne. Although I don't know who this fellow Taoist who comprehended the law of death is, he must be one of the top 10 on the Divine King's throne. With our strength, killing a few regular infinite primes won't take too much effort at all if we work together. Aside from that freakish Aoyama, there's no one in the Divine King's realm who can defeat us when we work together. Even the direct disciples of the sovereigns can't do that. If there really is such a person, then in my opinion, apart from Shui Yunlan, who has remained on the Divine King's throne for over 3 million years, there's probably no one else in the entire Saints world who has the right to do that." Shui Yunlan's eyes turned cold when she heard that. A sliver of powerful killing intent flashed through her eyes, and her gaze toward Sheng Man was icy cold. Shui Yunlan's reaction immediately confirmed Sheng Man's guess. A gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes, and he called out, "Shui Yunlan, it really is you!" Shui Yunlan's identity was exposed, and it immediately led to an uproar. In reality, everyone was extremely curious about her identity. They had made many guesses before, so now that they learned her name, they were all extremely shocked. If it was an unfamiliar name, everyone could accept it. They could understand that she had not attempted to challenge the Divine King's throne. However, not only were they familiar with Shui Yunlan's name, but they were even extremely familiar with it. At the same time, it was exactly because they were familiar with her name that they felt shocked and disbelief. This was because Shui Yunlan's name only ranked 6th on the Divine King's throne. Although this was not a low ranking, there was clearly a certain difference between her and Zhu Wen, who ranked 2nd. However, in reality, Zhu Wen was unable to do anything to Shui Yunlan. In reality, Zhu Wen and the other two people who ranked in the top 10 of the Divine King's throne fought Shui Yunlan together, but they were unable to suppress her at all. It was exactly because of this that many people became confused. Over 3 million years ago, Shui Yunlan ranked 9th on the Divine King's throne. However, the names on the Divine King's throne only record the experts of the current era, not historical figures. As a result, the rankings change frequently. Once a supreme Divine King dies or breaks through to the primordial realm, their name will vanish from the Divine King's throne. At this moment, a supreme Divine King said slowly from the crowd. Although he was a middle-aged man, he had clearly lived for many years. He knew quite a lot. According to my research on the top 10 of the Divine King's throne, Shui Yunlan's strength record on the Divine King's throne hasn't changed for over 3 million years. The reason why her ranking has risen from 9th to 6th is not because she challenged the Divine King's throne. Instead, it's because the people ranked before her have either broken through to the primordial realm or died, causing their names to vanish from the Divine King's throne. As a result, Shui Yunlan's ranking has risen as well. Although Shui Yunlan's ranking on the Divine King's throne has changed frequently over the past several million years, rising and falling, it's not because of her. Instead, it's because other supreme Divine Kings have either surpassed her and ranked before her, died, broke through, or disappeared, causing Shui Yunlan's ranking to change. As a result, Shui Yunlan's current ranking of 6th on the Divine King's throne is still the same as her strength from over 3 million years ago. On the other side, Shui Yunlan's face was extremely sunken. She glanced around coldly as killing intent surged in her heart. She was tempted to kill everyone present, now that the Ice Goddess Hall was in trouble and under the control of the traitor Wu Han. She did not want to expose her identity. Even if these people only knew her name and did not know that she came from the Ice Goddess Hall, she could not guarantee that her name would not reach the Ice Goddess Hall. Once Wu Han learnt that she had returned to the Saint's world, she would naturally be able to guess that she had found the Snow Goddess. By then, she would definitely search for the Snow Goddess regardless of the cost and eliminate her before she could recover. It was exactly because of that Shui Yunlan had never exposed her identity in the Azure Poseidon Palace. Sigh. Shui Yunlan sighed gloomily. She knew that she was powerless to change anything now that the situation had developed to this point. It was impossible for her to kill off all the supreme Divine Kings with her current strength. At this moment, she could not help but think about why she had entered the Azure Poseidon Palace in the first place. She did not want to become embroiled in too great of a conflict when she came to the Poseidon Palace. As a matter of fact, she had even made up her mind to not fight if she could. She only hoped to obtain some cultivation resources here so that Her Majesty could recover as soon as possible. However, Genshin's appearance had disrupted her original plans. Now that the Ice Goddess Hall was in trouble, she did not dare to return at all. If she wanted to eliminate Wu Han and the other traitors, if she wanted to protect the Snow Goddess better, she needed to find powerful reinforcements. However, the Ice Goddess Hall was renowned for being aloof in the Saints' world. They did not have any dealings with outside organizations, let alone any relationships. As a result, the Ice Goddess Hall could be described as isolated right now. At this moment, Mo Tianyin, who possessed a mysterious identity and had grievances with Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall, became the best person for her to work with. However, she needed to go through Genshin if she wanted to find Mo Tianyin. As a result, she had no choice but to help out when Genshin faced danger. However, she ended up exposing her identity because of this, causing the Snow Goddess to fall into danger. Shui Yunlan's heart became extremely heavy. Chapter 2205. At this moment, Sword Qi surged and rampaged. While Shui Yunlan was distracted, Zhu Wen's sword shone with a dazzling light, ripping through Shui Yunlan's protective ice. It struck Shui Yunlan's chest mercilessly, completely on par with an attack from a primordial realm expert. Shui Yunlan grunted heavily. Zhu Wen was the terrifying Divine King who ranked second after the Divine King after all. His battle prowess was extremely great. Even with the protection of her god artifact armor, Shui Yunlan was still quite injured after taking on the attack. As she flew back, blood flowed from her mouth. It was clearly exposed through the silver-white armor. It was so eye-catching. Shui Yunlan's injured. She can't last much longer. Everyone, let's go and take the cauldron. Many of the divine kings in the surroundings became excited when they saw this. They all took action as well. Shui Yunlan, you better hand over Jianchen. You're powerful, but you can't take Jianchen away. The skinny old man who had comprehended the laws of death sneered. Afterwards, he waved his hands, and a dense power of death immediately surged out, enveloping Shui Yunlan as a gray mist. With the appearance of the power of death, the vegetation withered, and everything withered. The entire ground darkened in a single instance, as if all life had been sucked away. What terrifying power of death! In the surroundings, the expressions of some of the supreme divine kings who were too close changed. They had only approached the power of death and had not come into contact with it at all. Yet they already felt their bodies weaken as if their vitality was rapidly draining away. They immediately stopped in fright. As for Shui Yunlan, who was enveloped by the power of death, her face hidden under the mask was pale. Gray mist would appear from time to time in her beautiful eyes that were the only part of her face that was exposed. The power of death had already used this opportunity to invade her body, causing her to become even weaker. Under the corrosion of the power of death, her tremendous life force drained away at an unbelievable rate. At the same time, a withered hand appeared behind Shui Yunlan silently, pressing against her with lightning speed. Xing Man, who had comprehended the laws of illusions and whose body was between illusions and reality, struck out as well, heavily injuring Shui Yunlan. PFFF! This time, Shui Yunlan directly vomited a mouthful of blood. The cold blood directly penetrated the armor and sprayed into the surroundings. After falling behind by a single step, she would always fall behind. Shui Yunlan's moment of distraction caused her to lose the initiative and fall into a disadvantageous position. After all, she did not possess a powerful chaotic body like Jianchen. She could endure any injuries, no matter how severe they were, without affecting her battle prowess. Now that she had received a powerful strike from 3 Supreme Divine King, Shui Yunlan was already heavily injured. At the same time, Shui Yunlan's cauldron ended up in Sheng Man's hands as well. Holding the cauldron, Sheng Man let out a strange laugh. Her body immediately turned illusory as if she had merged with the void and fled into the distance. Zhu Wen's eyes turned cold. He swung his sword, and a resplendent sword qi directly passed through Sheng Man's body. It failed to injure Sheng Man, who had turned illusory. The old man, who had comprehended the laws of death, also turned toward Sheng Man and struck out with lightning speed. Afterwards, several hundred supreme divine kings began a fierce battle around the cauldron. Every single one of them was a dragon among men. They were definitely not easy to deal with. Even with her grasp of the laws of illusions, Sheng Man was unable to escape with the cauldron when she faced several hundred divine kings. Several dozen god artifacts danced in the air as powerful ripples of energy shook up the surroundings. The blood of the divine king washed over the surroundings. In the intense battle, supreme god kings constantly suffered heavy injuries. There were even a few people who directly died there, having their souls wiped out. The cauldron had already changed owners several times. It was at the very center of the storm, so the attacks it endured were extremely violent. If it were not for the fact that it was a low-quality god artifact, it probably would have shattered to pieces already. No one cared about the owner of the cauldron anymore. Everyone only had a single objective, which was to take the cauldron and escape. Shui Yunlan, how did you know about the beast god continent? Have you been to our homeland? The golden divine dragon Ruedi and the fire phoenix Ji arrived before Shui Yunlan and asked eagerly and hopefully. Shui Yunlan's gaze remained cold, without any emotions at all. Beside her, Aladona flickered with green light as tremendous life force was channeled into Shui Yunlan's body, assisting her in suppressing the power of death and healing her wounds. She had grievances with Shui Yunlan, but Aladona was not someone who ignored the bigger picture. She knew that it was impossible for her to protect Jianqin with the current situation. She could only work with Shui Yunlan. As a result, even if she was extremely reluctant, she had to do this. Now is not the time to discuss this. If you really are the dragon and phoenix clans that came to the Saints' world with the winged tiger from a lower world a million years ago, then go help Jianqin, because Jianqin also comes from the grand continent of the heaven's origin, and he's on good terms with your clansmen. Aladona was the one who answered Ruedi and Ji. Ruedi and Ji were shocked. Although they did not come from that era, they had learnt many stories from a million years ago from their seniors. They knew that they were two powerful clans from a lower world. They knew nothing about the situation in the Saints' world back then, only following the winged tiger. Under the lead of the beast god winged tiger, they migrated from a lower world to the Saints' world and established the sect of dragons and phoenixes in the Saints' world. This was a top secret in the sect of dragons and phoenixes. Only clansmen with a certain status knew about it. However, information that was supposed to be top secret had actually been discovered by two outsiders, Shui Yunlan and Adriana. Moreover, they even mentioned the grand continent of the heavens' primordial continent as if they were extremely familiar with the lower world. What did all of this mean? At this moment, 3 old men sat on a mountain peak in a triangular formation several 100,000 kilometers away. A colossal formation had already been cast down between the 3 of them, giving off powerful pulses of energy. The formation's energy has basically been accumulated. We've locked onto the target's presence as well. It's time for us to take action, said one of the old men. The other 2 old men nodded at the same time. They formed hand seals and activated the formation. Immediately, a tsunami-like energy erupted from the formation, causing it to shine brightly and illuminate the mountains. Several 100,000 kilometers away, the space around the cauldron that all the Supreme Divine King fought over suddenly distorted violently. Afterwards, the cauldron suddenly vanished under everyone's gazes. When it reappeared, it was already several 100,000 kilometers away, in the center of the formation, cast down by the 3 old men. Someone has secretly stolen the cauldron through a secret technique. It's in that direction. Chase them. How dare they steal food from the jaws of a tiger? They're looking to die. All the Supreme Divine King bellowed out, furiously, as they shot towards the 3 old men several 100,000 kilometers away. Although the cauldron had vanished, the special pulses that belonged to a divine king remained. Coupled with the fact that the 3 old men had stolen the cauldron, the pulses of energy were just too powerful. Even several 100,000 kilometers away, they were unable to hide from the Supreme Divine King. Let's go, the 3 old men called out. They worked together to shake up the struggling cauldron and fled as quickly as they could. However, at this moment, a small, dilapidated tower that was only the size of a fist suddenly flew out of the cauldron. Under the shocked gazes of the 3 old men, a figure silently appeared before them. To no surprise, this person was Jianqin. With a wave of his hand, Jianqin stowed the Inata tower away. He clasped his fist at the 3 old men and smiled, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I probably would have struggled to escape from their encirclement." With that, Jianqin turned around and left. He used the linear lightning release to hurry off. God damn it, it's Jianqin. How did he break free from the god artifact and escape? The 3 old men roared out in exasperation as they watched Jianqin leave. Chapter 2206. We've spent so much effort to set up the heaven-stealing formation and capture Jianqin after much difficulty. We only needed to bring the cauldron out of the Poseidon palace, and the seniors waiting outside would naturally take care of him. In the end, something like this happened. What are you still standing around for? We can't let him get away. Chase after him. What's the point of chasing after him? Although Jianshin is only an early divine king, his battle prowess is at the level of a divine king. Even if the three of us work together, we won't be able to defeat him. We might even lose our lives. Cut the crap, you two. Run. The group of divine kings are coming our way. Not only have we failed to capture Jianshin, but we've even become the culprits who helped Jianshin escape their encirclement. Those people will never let us go in their fury. The three old men's expressions were extremely ugly. They glanced at the group of divine kings who were hundreds of thousands of kilometers away and fled in another direction with reluctance on their faces. Up ahead, Jianshin's sword light surged into the sky. He was enveloped by a layer of sword chi as he turned into lightning and fled quickly. Behind him, several hundred divine kings pursued relentlessly. They all unleashed secret techniques and turned into shooting stars, traveling as quickly as they could. They traveled thousands of kilometers in an instant, although there were hundreds of thousands of kilometers between them, a distance that was unreachable for mortals. It only took the supreme divine kings several dozen breaths to travel at full speed before them. Among these people, Shui Yunlan, Aladona, and Rue Di from the sect of dragons and phoenixes were also part of the pursuing group. However, the four of them had clearly gathered together now. Ming Dong led the 5 divine generals and was in the group as well. At this moment, Ming Dong roared out furiously. A layer of red flames burned on him, causing his speed to skyrocket. He actually surpassed everyone and charged to the very front. At the same time, Ming Dong's life force was withering away. His long black hair was turning silver white at a visible rate. It was obvious that he had paid a huge price for that instantaneous burst of terrifying speed. Jianshin, come into my divine palace. My divine palace is hidden in my primordial spirit. I'd like to see if these people dare to extract my primordial spirit. Ming Dong called out. A small, exquisite divine hall had already appeared in his hand. It was extremely exquisite. Quick, stop him. We can't let Jianshin enter the temple. The divine king shouted from behind. If they didn't know Ming Dong's identity, they naturally wouldn't have cared that Ming Dong had taken Jianshin into the temple. They would have killed both of them. However, all of them now knew that Jianshin was connected to the heavenly palace of Bixing and had the protection of the 5 divine generals. His status was extraordinary. If Ming Dong really took Jianshin into his divine palace and hid it in his primordial spirit, they really wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Up ahead, Jianshin also sensed Ming Dong's life force rapidly fading away. His heart sank slightly as well. The senses of his soul that belonged to the divine king expanded, covering several 100,000 kilometers in a single instance. It enveloped Ming Dong, Shui Yunlan, and Aladona. A voice that only the 3 of them could hear rang out silently. Jianshin's voice surprised Ming Dong. He looked at Jianshin in doubt. The red flames on him vanished rapidly, and he slowed down as well. At the same time, Shui Yunlan and Aladona's eyes narrowed as well. They became surprised and doubtful. Let's not follow them. Jianshin has his own plans. Aladona stopped Rue Di and Ji. He has a plan? That's several hundred supreme divine kings we're talking about. Even Zhu Wen, who ranks 2nd, is among them. What kind of plan can he have? Rue Di and Ji were confused. Heya, do you see them? Remember them for me. Up ahead, Jianshin stopped temporarily as well. He called out Heya and pointed in Ming Dong and Aladona's direction from afar. I remember. Heavens, they're all supreme divine kings. As soon as Heya appeared, his face paled in fright as his legs trembled. Several hundred supreme divine kings were squeezed together. The impact of such a grand sight on his mind was just too great. It made him shiver in fright. Jianqin stowed Heyo away in an ordinary divine hall again before charging to the 6th floor without even looking back. Afterwards, Jianqin did not stop. He led the several hundred supreme divine kings behind him, climbing upwards in a straight line. He passed through the 6th floor, the 7th floor, and directly arrived in the world of volcanoes on the 8th floor. Basically, as soon as Jianqin set foot on the 8th floor, several supreme divine kings followed closely behind him. To no surprise, Zhu Wen, Sheng Man, and the expert who controlled the laws of death were among them. Although the remaining people did not know each other's identities, they were extremely powerful as well. Although they were not as powerful as Zhu Wen and Sheng Man, who ranked in the top 10, they were not that weak. They were the fastest group of people, basically following right behind Jianqin. The remaining divine kings were still behind, hurrying over. Jianqin, you have nowhere to run, and you can't protect the girl either. You better hand her over. I won't make things difficult for you for the sake of the heavenly palace of Bixing and the God clan, Zhu Wen said sternly. That's right. We don't want to offend either the God clan or the heavenly palace of Bixing. It's best if you hand over the girl. Don't make things difficult for me, said the old man with the laws of death. The remaining divine kings all looked at Jianqin with mixed feelings. A mere early divine king was actually connected to the God clan and the heavenly palace of Bixing at the same time. This made them envious. There's only one person, but there are so many of you. I wonder who I should hand her over to? Jianqin teased. That's none of your business. You just need to hand over the girl. We'll naturally rely on our own abilities to see who gets the girl in the end. We just don't want to touch you. Of course, if you insist on not handing her over, we'll have to take action even if we have to risk offending the God clan and the heavenly palace of Bixing. A few divine kings spoke out firmly, expressing that they would not give up on the girl. As they spoke, more and more divine kings arrived on the floor. The people who had fallen behind constantly arrived as well. Jianqin suddenly smiled strangely. He glanced past the divine kings and said, I'm already undefeatable on this floor, so why should I hand her over to you? With that, Jianqin suddenly fell towards the lava below. At the same time, the space where he had been standing before pulsed. A rope that flickered with violet light suddenly appeared, binding the space there with the power of space. If Jianqin had been a little slower, he probably would have been bound by the rope already. Plop! A strange sound rang out from the boiling lava below him. Under the surprised and confused gazes of all the divine kings, Jianqin dove into the lava without any preparations, disappearing from everyone's sight. Chapter 2207. He actually ran into the lava. Does he want to die? God damn it. This Jianqin would rather die than let us obtain the girl, many divine kings cursed. None of them dared to move. They were not bold enough to charge into the lava recklessly, like Jianqin. In reality, even if there were experts who ranked in the top 10 of the divine king, they would not dare to enter the lava alone under the protection of the God artifact unless they worked together and unleashed the full power of the God artifact. Only then would they be able to last for a while. It's not the first time Jianqin has entered the lava. It's said that he was thrown into the lava several years ago. Everyone thought he was dead, but isn't he still alive? Be careful, everyone. This is Jianqin's scheme. He wants to paralyze us and then change his position in the lava so that he can escape in another direction. That's right. Jianqin has a way to survive in the lava. Everyone spread out. We can't let him escape under our noses. Jianqin had already taken out the Anita Tower as soon as he entered the scorching lava. He hid in it and steered the Anita Tower towards the very depths. He expanded the Anita Tower to several hundred meters in size and rampaged through the lava. He smashed through many rocks at the bottom of the lava and pierced through several volcanoes, causing a great disturbance. Jianqin's actions directly affected the surface of the lava. The entire sea of lava suddenly became turbulent, and several volcanoes in the surroundings directly collapsed. Huge mountains fell into the lava, causing flames to fill the air. The fire element in the entire space became abnormally violent. All the volcanoes were stimulated, erupting together. Lava rained down on the 8th floor. God damn it, what's going on? Why did something so great happen all of a sudden? It must be Genshin. It must be that bastard Genshin's doing. Just what is he doing in the lava? The divine kings gathered there all began to curse. They hated Genshin to the core. They all donned their armor as they dodged the lava rain in horrible shape. Their faces were sunken. I'm very curious about what Genshin is relying on to survive in the lava for so long and cause such a great disturbance, Genshin said with a frown. Shen Man had already become illusionary under her large cloak as she spoke with her old and hoarse voice. Genshin must have a god artifact of quite a high grade. It's extremely likely that he's using it to survive in the lava, Zhu Wen said sternly as he constantly shot out streaks of light to disperse the lava rain above him. The divine kings nearby all spoke up when they heard that. Even low-quality god artifacts can't last for long in the lava. The bottom of the lava can even melt low-quality god artifacts. Does Genshin have a medium-quality god artifact on him? Even infinite primes will struggle to unleash 10% of the power of medium-quality god artifacts. They're usually controlled by chaotic primes. It's impossible for Genshin to control them with his mere cultivation as a divine king. Even if he has gained the recognition of the artifact spirit, it's impossible for him to use such a powerful god artifact with his cultivation as a divine king. All right, there's also a small, damaged tower on Genshin. It's appeared many times in the past. Do you think it's the tower? The tower is already so damaged. I think it's about to be destroyed. A god artifact that's about to be destroyed is basically useless apart from its tough material. It doesn't have any divine might at all, so what can it do? That's not necessarily true. Even if a high-grade god artifact is damaged, it can still remain unscathed in the lava with its toughness. If Genshin really can move about freely in the lava with a god artifact that's about to be destroyed, just what grade is the god artifact? Is it medium quality or high quality? High. Genshin hid in the Inata Tower in the depths of the lava. He controlled the Inata Tower to move about randomly like a headless fly. Lava lizard, where are you hiding? Come out, come out. Genshin prayed inside the Inata Tower. He waited eagerly and excitedly for the lizard to appear. He had planned everything out long ago. A plan to deal with the several hundred supreme, divine king outside was silently carried out. He would draw out the lava lizard hidden at the bottom of the lava and use its terrifying strength to deal with the divine king outside. At this moment, Genshin clearly felt the Inata Tower tremble gently. This immediately made Genshin's eyes light up. He rejoiced, and even his breathing became ragged uncontrollably. This was because the tremors were definitely not caused by the Inata Tower crashing into the rocks. Instead, it had been attacked by the lava lizard. I've finally alarmed you. Genshin stood on the first floor of the Inata Tower with the 9-star sort of heavenly ways in hand. He was secretly overjoyed. With a flash, he left the Inata Tower and appeared outside. Immediately, scorching lava squeezed over, burning Genshin's chaotic body bright red. Genshin did not care about the lava in the surroundings at all. His eyes immediately locked onto a huge, black figure. It was the lava lizard that had been living here for a long time. Its 2 eyes were several feet in size. Its 2 eyes, which were several meters wide, stared at the Inata Tower unblinkingly. Genshin did not stay any longer after learning the lizard's exact location. He immediately entered the Inata Tower and flew it high into the air. He arrived above the lizard's head and viciously smashed it down. Bang! With a thud, the Inata Tower struck the lizard's head with terrifying force due to its toughness. The lizard immediately began to see stars. Its huge head shook as if it was drunk. However, it returned to its senses very soon. The pain from its head drove it mad. Its huge eyes were filled with fury as it directly swung its claw at the Inata tower, knocking it several hundred meters away. Jianqin stabilized the Inata tower. He did not stop there. He turned the Inata tower into a cone and pointed it at the lizard. He used the Inata tower's greatest speed to collide with it again, causing the lizard's colossal body to tumble a few times in a row. This time, the lizard clearly felt even more pain than before. It roared at the sky, causing the lava in the surroundings to churn. Its eyes had already become blood red as it charged at the Inata tower furiously. The Inata tower immediately rose into the air and flew above the lava. As for the lava lizard, it chased after him relentlessly. It was extremely furious. The lava is becoming more and more violent. The waves have actually reached a height of 3,000 meters. This has never happened before. Just what is that bastard Genshin doing down there? Chapter 2208. All the supreme divine kings hovered 10,000 meters in the air as they stared at the churning sea of lava. The light in their eyes flickered as they became uneasy. At this moment, the lava sea could no longer be described as turbulent. The entire lava sea was violently fluctuating, and huge waves kept rising and falling, slapping high into the sky. It was getting more and more violent, as if there was an angry dragon overturning the seas and rivers inside. All the supreme divine kings present shivered in fear when they saw this. They felt a chill run down their spines. This was because the lava was no ordinary lava. It was thousands of times hotter than the core of the sun. It was something that even infinite primes needed to deal with carefully. Suddenly, a damaged tower that was several hundred meters tall flew out of the lava, directly surging into the sky. The moment they saw the tower, all the supreme, divine kings rejoiced. Immediately, a divine king charged towards the Inata tower. However, not everyone was like that. There were quite a few people who glanced at the Inata tower before looking at the swollen lava below them. Clearly, they had sensed something, so they became stern. Something's off. There's something under the lava, a divine king growled. With that, the lava below them suddenly exploded. A fire-red, abnormally huge lizard suddenly charged out. Its huge eyes were filled with anger as it stared at the Inata tower. With a swing of its tail, it struck the Inata tower at an unbelievable speed with a sonic boom, producing a heavy thud. Naturally, the Inata tower was unscathed. It only drifted 100 meters away from the lizard's swing. On the other hand, the lava lizard cried out in pain. It grimaced in pain, but it also aroused its ferocious nature. Its eyes were filled with bloodlust. Primordial realm. Primordial realm. This is a vicious beast that has truly reached the primordial realm. No, that's impossible. Once someone reaches the primordial realm, it's impossible for them to enter the Poseidon Palace. How can a magical beast at the primordial realm appear here? This presence is definitely not an early infinite prime. It's even more powerful than that. Heavens, have my eyes gone blurry? How can such a terrifying existence appear in the Poseidon Palace? It's a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime at the very least. That's mid-infinite prime. Let's go. We're not its opponent. Genshin, you bastard. You've actually lured out such a terrifying beast. I'll never spare you. Around them, looking at the huge lizard that suddenly jumped out of the lava, everyone was shocked, and huge waves of shock surged in their hearts. Genshin appeared above the Inata tower with the 9-star sort of heavenly ways in the sky. With a wave of his hand, he stowed the Inata tower away. He looked at the divine king in the surroundings, whose expressions had become extremely interesting. He could not help but laugh aloud. Everyone, this lizard is far too powerful. I'm weak, so I'm unable to defeat it at all. So I can only trouble you. Don't worry too much. There's so many of you, so as long as you work together, I believe you'll definitely be able to kill this lizard. As for me, I won't be of any help if I stay. Instead, I'll make it so that you won't be able to focus on dealing with this lizard. As a result, I can only go first." With that, Jianqin took out a cosmic movement talisman and vanished into thin air. He had already left the floor. "Jianqin, you're despicable." All the divine king gritted their teeth, but they did not dare to stay for long. They all distanced themselves from the lizard and fled in all directions. The lizard's original target was Jianqin. Now that Jianqin had vanished, it naturally vented all its fury on the surrounding divine king. With a swipe of its tongue, it directly wrapped around a divine king and swallowed him. With a swipe of its claws, 2 divine kings' bodies directly collapsed. Their souls were wiped out. With a sweep of its tail, a large swathe of divine kings behind it were reduced to pieces. For a moment, the infuriated lizard began a massacre on the 8th floor. It was invincible and no one could stop it. In just a short while, the divine king suffered heavy casualties. If this lizard was a first heavenly layer infinite prime, I would be able to fend it off. However, it's too powerful, so I can only leave first. Sheng Man had already become illusionary under her large cloak. As she said that, she directly charged towards the entrance to the 7th floor. However, at this exact moment, the lizard opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of scorching flames. It enveloped the entire region and swallowed Sheng Man and the 6 other divine kings. The 7 divine kings were trapped in the flames, and they immediately cried out in pain. In just a few seconds, 2 divine kings had been reduced to ashes, while the remaining 5 were heavily injured. They charged out of the sea of flames. Sheng Man's cloak had been burnt away, revealing her true appearance. It was a white-haired face that was filled with wrinkles and vicious wounds. At this moment, she was enveloped by the gentle light of a bronze mirror on her chest. From the pulses that the bronze mirror gave off, it was clearly a defensive god artifact. However, even with the protection of the god artifact, she was still burnt. She was quite injured. This lizard is at the 7th heavenly layer of infinite prime at the very least, or even the 8th heavenly layer. It's already late infinite prime. It's impossible for such a powerful existence to appear in the Azure Poseidon Palace, Zhu Wen exclaimed. Zhu Wen cried out in surprise. He had clashed with the giant lizard once and was sent flying with a casual swipe of the lizard's claw. The divine armor on his body had also dimmed. They were not on the same level at all. I understand now. This lizard didn't come from the outside. It's an innate spirit formed from the power of fire in the lava after countless years. This seems to be the 7th floor of the Azure Poseidon Palace. Jianqin looked at the rather familiar landscape, and his eyes gradually lit up. It really is the 7th floor. I never thought that the cosmic movement talisman would actually send me here. Very soon, Jianqin confirmed his location. The light in his eyes flickered, and then he suddenly looked at the entrance to the 8th floor. Cold killing intent immediately filled his eyes. Swish! In the next moment, Jianqin had already shot off. Sword light flickered around him, and like a bolt of lightning, he charged towards the entrance as quickly as he could. Jianqin moved so quickly that he could truly cross thousands of kilometers in a single instance. Before long, he had crossed the endless landscape and arrived at the entrance to the 8th floor. Just at this moment, a supreme god king in damaged armor who had been burnt to a crisp arrived on the 7th floor from the 8th floor. Clearly, he had narrowly escaped death on the 8th floor. By the time he made it to the 7th floor, he was heavily injured and extremely weak. He did not have much battle prowess left. However, the Divine King did not seem to feel any pain at all. Seeing how he had successfully left the world of volcanoes, he could not help but laugh aloud. He felt like he had just survived a disaster. This was because he had personally witnessed several divine kings, who were even more powerful than him, die to the lizard without being able to put up any resistance at all. He felt extremely fortunate that he had managed to escape from the jaws of death. However, at this moment there was a flash of cold light. a sword suddenly appeared, stabbing towards his forehead with lightning speed. Chapter 2209. The Divine King paled in fright. He had just escaped death, so he was in a relaxed state, coupled with the fact that he had never thought that someone would be lying in ambush here. He was unable to dodge the sudden attack at all. Spurt! The sword shone with a starry light. With lightning speed, it stabbed into the Divine King's forehead, wiping out his soul on the spot. Jianqin slowly drew the 9-star sword of heavenly ways as he stared at the corpse coldly. He showed no pity at all as he casually took away the space ring. "You've hunted me down for so long, so it's time for you to pay back some interest," Jianqin murmured. As he said that, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone brightly as well. Vaguely, for stars seemed to appear, directly slashing towards the exit before him. Spurt! When Jianqin slashed out, a Divine King just happened to descend from the 8th floor as if he was fleeing for his life. Before he could even react, Jianqin had beheaded him. Immediately, blood spurted into the air. "Jianqin!" The Divine King bellowed out furiously. He was both surprised and furious, but before he could even summon his soul, Jianqin's second attack had arrived. It cleaved his head in half, wiping out his soul. Ignoring how heavily injured the Divine Kings were in the 8th floor and how much of their battle prowess they still had, every single one of them believed that they had escaped from the lizard when they successfully made it to the 7th floor. They could not help but rejoice from surviving a disaster, so they lowered their guard to the lowest possible level. Jianqin, on the other hand, was always prepared, ready to unleash his most powerful attack at any time. Therefore, his action of waiting for the rabbit to show up naturally achieved a very significant effect. After 2 breaths of time, another person descended from the 8th level. Jianqin executed the same move as before, and he didn't give the person any time to react or prepare before he stabbed out with his sword. It was swift, like a bolt of lightning, and it directly pierced through the person's forehead and killed him on the spot. However, there were a total of 4 people who came down this time. When Jianqin killed the first person, the other 3 also noticed his presence. "Jianqin, how bold of you to remain here," Yi Fuqian sneered. One of the burly men bellowed out. When he saw the person Jianqin had killed, he immediately became furious. He bellowed out, "You actually killed the successor of the solitary sword lineage, Gongzhang. The solitary sword lineage will not spare you." Jianqin's expression froze. Because there was no one he was familiar with on the 8th floor, he had to stand guard here. As soon as he saw someone come down, he would immediately attack. There was no time to identify who it was. Only now did he discover in surprise that the Supreme God King he had killed was actually one of the 8 people who had attacked him before, the successor of the solitary sword lineage, Gongzhang. However, Gongzhang's dazzling, golden robes were in tatters now. They had become pitch black, having lost their golden luster. Even his entire body had almost been burnt to a crisp. "By Legmont, do it!" The burly man who called out was Jia Na, who had protected Gongzhang by Yi and Songing before. Jia Na bellowed out and attacked Jianqin with the other 2 at the same time. Bai Yi's gaze was cold. Without any hesitation, he took out his metal rod and attacked Jianqin as hard as he could. Jia Na took out his god artifact as well, launching an attack as soon as he could. Aside from Legmont, all 3 of them possessed god artifacts. However, Legmont only used supreme quality saint artifacts. It was 3 against 1, so they possessed an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. Moreover, Jia Na ranked within the top 100 of the Divine King's seat, making him extremely powerful. However, the 3 of them were like Gongzhang. They had been heavily injured on the 8th floor, where some of their skin had been burnt to a crisp. Their true battle prowess was obviously nowhere near their peak condition. On the other hand, Jianqin was at his peak condition. With the god artifact, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, his battle prowess had increased drastically. As a result, Jianqin did not lose the upper hand against the 3 of them. Instead, he gained a slight advantage. Spurt. After just a few exchanges, Jia Na vomited blood. His face was extremely pale. He had not been injured by Jianchen. Instead, he had been swept by the lizard's tail on the 8th floor, directly taking away half of his life. Now that he was fighting against Jianchen, his injuries had worsened. Let's go. Jia Na bellowed out and stopped fighting. He called out to the two of them and fled into the distance. You want to leave? It won't be that easy. Jianchen snorted coldly. A strand of profound sword qi shot out, catching up to Jia Na in a single moment and entering his soul. Jia Na cried out miserably as he plummeted from the sky. His soul had almost dispersed. He was so heavily injured that he did not even have the strength to run anymore. At the same time, 4 huge stars appeared from Jianchen's 9-star, sword of heavenly ways. They collided with Bai Yi's metal rod. Bai Yi grunted out. The web between his thumb and forefinger cracked, and his fingers broke. The metal rod flew out of his hands. However, Jianchen's 9-star sword of heavenly ways did not lose all momentum after knocking away Bai Yi's god artifact. It stabbed into Bai Yi's head with its remaining might. Just like that, Bai Yi died. Without Jia Na and Bai Yi holding him back, Legmont naturally could not last for long when he was injured. He was slain by Jianchen very soon. Afterwards, Jianchen arrived before Jia Na, who clutched his head and wailed out. He mercilessly ended Jia Na's life. Jianchen removed Jia Na's space ring and picked up his god artifact. The god artifact was a huge sword that was as wide as a hand. Aside from the sword, Jianchen also discovered a thumb-sized bead on Jia Na's corpse. The bead was also a god artifact. 2 god artifacts, one for attack and one for defense. It looks like Jia Na is just too heavily injured, so he can only use 1 god artifact. Jianchan murmured before picking up Bai Yi's metal rod. He tossed it into the Anata Tower as well. After thinking about it, Jianchen suddenly took out the space rings he had obtained. After rummaging through them, he took out several dozen formation discs in one go. Afterwards, he carefully made his way to the 8th floor with the discs, setting them all up at the entrance with lightning speed. After setting everything up, Jianchen did not even look at them. He turned around and left, returning to the 7th floor. These formation discs were either for attack or defense. They were of quite high quality. Jianchen placed over a dozen formation discs together, forming a barrier at the entrance of the 8th floor, preventing people from coming down. God damn it, bastard. Who's so despicable as to block the way down? Jianchen could vaguely hear furious roars, which filled him with great joy. Several divine kings on the 8th floor stared at the barrier created by the formation discs as their faces paled from anger. Let's work together and destroy these formations. These formations won't last much longer, said a divine king in a hurry. However, just when they were about to take action, the lizard glanced over as well. With a swipe of its tongue, it dragged a supreme god king into its mouth. The faces of the other supreme god kings paled in fright as they fled in all directions. We can't go down to the 7th floor. Let's go to the 9th floor. Quick, quick, quick. Immediately, all the divine kings who had fled to the 7th floor charged towards the 9th floor. Chapter 2210. All the supreme divine kings gathered on the 8th floor of the Poseidon Palace fled for their lives. They all pushed their speed to the limit, and some of them even burned their essence blood, paying a heavy price to use secret techniques to flee for their lives. The lizard was just too powerful. It was a 7th heavenly layer infinite prime at the very least, or even an 8th heavenly layer infinite prime. Even though it was not too far away from chaotic prime, it was not something they could deal with. Even Zhu Wen, who ranked 2nd among the divine kings and possessed battle prowess that allowed him to kill regular primordial realm experts, was not much more powerful than an ant before the lizard. Zhu Wen, Sheng Man, and the divine king who grasped the laws of death fled for their lives as well. The 3 of them used secret techniques to erupt with terrifying speed, crossing 10,000 kilometers in a single instance. They were at the very front, getting closer and closer to the entrance of the 9th floor. At this moment, excitement filled their eyes as if they could already see themselves entering the 9th floor and escaping with their lives. However, at this moment, a huge volcano flew through the air. With a sweep of the lizard's tail, the huge volcano was sent flying. It was unknown whether it was a coincidence or intentional, but the huge volcano smashed right into the entrance to the 9th floor, covering the entrance and cutting off everyone's path of retreat. No, all the supreme divine kings roared out in regret when they saw this. Despair filled their hearts. If it were any other time, they would have been able to smash the volcano to pieces with their strength. Even if the rocks of the volcano were extremely tough and could be used as materials for forging artifacts, they would still be able to smash the volcano to pieces as long as they had time. But now, there was a terrifyingly powerful lizard here. They did not have the time to do that. They would probably be wiped out before they could even clear the path. Not only could they not return to the 7th floor right now, but they could not return to the 9th floor either. They had truly been trapped on the 8th floor. Zhu Wen also gritted his teeth. Madness filled his eyes as he called out, "Since we can't escape, let's throw our lives at it. If we fight alone, only death awaits us, but there are several hundred of us, and we have God artifacts for several decades. If we form a formation and fight to the death, it's not like we have no chance at all." Jianqin no longer paid any attention to the situation on the 8th floor. Right now, he was about to leave the 7th floor and fly towards the 6th floor of the Poseidon Palace. He had been summoned by Jianqin as well. He followed Jianqin closely, guiding Jianqin from time to time. "I can sense it. There in that direction. Master, the people you told me to remember seem to be together." Heya said as he pointed at Jianqin when they arrived on the 5th floor. "Well done, Heya." Jianqin was in high spirits. He seemed to be in a much better mood. Immediately, he hurried off in the direction Heya had pointed. Several million kilometers away on the 5th floor, Mingdong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan Rui Di, and Ji of the Dragon and Phoenix clans gathered together. I really never thought that Mingdong would actually come from the Tian Yuan continent. I've heard from the seniors of my clan that our sect of dragons and phoenixes originally lived on the Tian Yuan continent, but we moved to the Beast God continent with the Beast God. The Tian Yuan continent is our ancestral land. Rui Di looked at Mingdong excitedly. His gaze towards Mingdong was particularly close. "Mingdong, tell us what the Tian Yuan continent and the Beast God continent are like. What's the situation like now?" Ji also stared at Mingdong with shining eyes. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. "Now's not the time to talk about that. Let's think of a way to help my brother," Mingdong said in a low voice. His face was sunken and he was stern. He was unable to cheer up no matter what. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared in the gloomy night sky that was only illuminated by the faint moonlight of the full moon. It shot through the sky like a bolt of lightning, shining with blinding light as it approached Mingdong and the others. The worry on Mingdong's face completely vanished when he saw the streak of light. He was overjoyed. Shui Yunlan and Aladona were clearly relieved when they saw the flash of light. They were all supreme god kings, so their senses were extraordinarily great. As soon as the streak of light appeared, they recognized Jianqin, who was wrapped in it. However, when they saw that only Jianqin and Heya had arrived, they became confused and curious. "Jianqin, where are the divine kings chasing you?" Mingdong went up to them enthusiastically. He looked behind Jianqin cautiously. He was extremely confused. "They're all on the 8th floor." Jianqin did not hide anything, telling them about the lizard. The moment they heard about the existence of the giant lava lizard, all of their expressions changed slightly. It was obvious that they were stunned. "Mingdong, I never thought that in just a few hundred years you would have reached the level of a divine king. and you have so many god artifacts on you. Looks like you've been doing pretty well in the saints' world in the past few years. You made me worry for you for so long." Jianqin studied Mingdong before glancing at the 5 divine generals behind him. He felt happy for Mingdong from the bottom of his heart. Only now did the 2 brothers, who had been separated for several hundred years, have the time to catch up. "How can I compare to you? The reason why my strength has increased so quickly is because I have an inexhaustible supply of cultivation resources over the years. In addition to the powerful inheritance and various nurturing, it's impossible for me not to become strong. I'm not like you, who roamed the saints' world alone without any background. Yet you managed to become a divine king in such a short amount of time. Moreover, you're probably only an early divine king right now, while I'm already a late divine king. I've basically reached the end of this level of cultivation, while you still have a lot of room for growth. Compared to you, I'm nowhere close," Mingdong said in a depressed manner. Jianchen patted Mingdong's shoulder and exchanged some simple greetings before looking at Shui Yunlan. He said, "Protector Shui, why are you in the Azure Poseidon Palace? Where's my sister? Did you take her into the Azure Poseidon Palace?" "Her Highness is fine now. She is in a safe place and did not follow me into Poseidon Palace," Shui Yunlan answered. Her voice remained cold and emotionless. However, her gaze towards Jianqin had some mixed feelings. She could not help but think of how weak Jianqin had been in her eyes back on the Tianyuan continent. He was not even comparable to an ant. Yet now, in just a few hundred years, Jianqin had already reached the same height as her, which left Shui Yunlan deeply shocked. As a matter of fact, she found it unreal. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 2211. Jianqin's talent is monstrous. His rate of growth is just far too fast. In just 300 to 400 years, he has gone from a puny mortal to a divine king, and his battle prowess is so great as well. He's only an early divine king, yet he possesses the battle prowess to kill a supreme divine king. He still hasn't reached the end of his path in the divine king realm. There's still a lot of room for improvement in the future. With his current battle prowess, even I won't be his opponent once he reaches the peak of the divine king realm, Shui Yunlan thought. Shui Yunlan thought. Her expression was mixed, and light flickered in her icy cold eyes. But why is he from the immortals' world? And why is he the successor of the sword sect of Violet Heavens? The esteemed ice goddess was injured by the grand exalt of the sword sect of Violet Heavens in the past, and she still hasn't recovered. No one knows if she's still alive or not, and she doesn't even care about the betrayal of the ice goddess Hall. Jianqin and our ice goddess Hall will become enemies in the future. I wonder if I was right or wrong to help Jianqin while bearing the consequences of exposing my identity and placing the ice goddess in constant danger. Sai, whatever. What Mo Tianyin said in the past was not without reason. The ice goddess Hall is currently facing an unprecedented danger, basically on the brink of destruction. We don't even know if we can make it through successfully, so what's the point of me continuing to think about these grievances? The matter at hand is to find a way to recover Her Majesty's strength. Only when Her Majesty recovers to her peak condition will she have the power to overturn the situation. Shui Yunlan sighed. Shui Yunlan sighed inside. Not only did Jian Chen's rate of growth amaze her, but it also made her feel threatened and uneasy. After learning that Changyang Mingyue had not entered the Azure Poseidon Palace with Shui Yunlan, Jianqin also became disappointed. He could not help but think of Changyang Mingyue's familiar face at that moment. His childhood memories surged out like a fountain, filling Jianqin with fresh memories. Even after several hundred years, it still felt like it had happened yesterday. He clearly remembered that when he was young, Saint Force had tested him as a cripple who could not cultivate. His status in Changyang Prefecture had plummeted from a dazzling new star to a level where even regular servants could mock and bully him as they wished. During that time, his father, Changyang Ba, had neglected him. In the vast Chanyang prefecture, aside from his mother, only his sister, Chanyang Mingyue, was the person who cared about him the most. She basically cared for him in every possible way, thinking about him at all times. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, this sibling relationship was nothing special, but to Jianqin, who had the memories of being an orphan, it had become a torch that warmed his soul. It touched his heart deeply, captivated him, and became a memory that he would never forget. It was deeply embedded in the depths of his soul. Jianqin had not seen his sister since he had parted ways with Chanyang Mingyue on the Tianyuan continent. He missed her very much. Jianqin, do you come from the Tianyuan continent? At this moment, Rue Di stared at Jianqin eagerly as he asked nervously. A gleam of light immediately flashed through Jianqin's eyes when Rue Di mentioned the Tianyuan continent. There should be extremely few people who knew about the existence of the Tianyuan continent in the Saints' world. So how did this person know about it? Could it be you are? Jianqin looked at Rue Di. These two are Rue Di and Ji from the sect of dragons and phoenixes. The sect of dragons and phoenixes was brought to the Saints' world by the winged tigerback on the beast god continent. Aladona explained, explaining the identities of Rue Di and the others to Jianqin. What? You're the dragon and phoenix clans that left the beast god continent back then? Jianqin was extremely surprised after learning the identities of Rue Di and Ji. However, he soon felt overjoyed silently. He had just been worrying about how to help Rue Jin and Honglian find their clansmen who had left the Tianyuan continent 1,000,000 years ago in the vast Saints' world. He had never thought that he would come across people from the sect of dragons and phoenixes on this trip to Poseidon Palace. He was overjoyed and overjoyed. At this moment, Aladona suddenly smiled mysteriously. She said to Jianqin, "Jianqin, look who this is." As she said that, a divine hall appeared in Aladona's hand. She gently tossed it into the air. The temple suddenly expanded in the sky, turning into a huge temple that was thousands of feet in size in an instant. With a muffled sound, it gently landed on the ground, picking up the dust on the ground. Jianqin looked at the divine hall in confusion and curiosity. He had no idea what Aladona was up to. At this moment, the door to the divine hall slowly opened. Afterwards, a woman in a purple dress walked out slowly with a zither in her arms. She was extremely beautiful and peerless. She gave off an otherworldly aura, making her seem like an otherworldly fairy. The moment he saw the woman, Jianqin seemed to be paralyzed. His body suddenly froze, and disbelief filled his handsome face. "Moor!" However, in the next moment, Jianqin suddenly cried out. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he charged over excitedly and hugged Shangguan Moor tightly. "Jianqin, I knew you wouldn't die." Shangguan Moor struggled to remain calm when she saw Jianqin. She became emotional as she smiled faintly. She stowed away the zither of the demonic cry and hugged Jianqin gently, pressing her head against Jianqin's chest. As the saying went, absence made the heart grow fonder. After several decades of separation, Jianqin and Shangguan Moor had always worried about each other's safety in the dangerous Saints' world. Now that they had reunited, the feelings of longing they had suppressed immediately erupted like a geyser. "Moor, how have you been in the Taoist sect of divine sound in the past few years? Have you been mistreated?" Jianqin asked gently. His voice was filled with concern. "Brother, there's a kid called Jun Kong who's interested in sister-in-law. You have to be careful. That kid's not weak. He's also a supreme divine king, and he has a god artifact on him." Mingdong, who had already sat on the ground and consumed a god tear pill to heal, suddenly said to Jianqin, "Jun Kong?" Jianqin murmured. He stared at Shangguan Moor in question. Jun Kong's master is one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound. At the same time, he's the person with the greatest talent in the Taoist sect of divine sound right now. He did indeed have improper thoughts about me in the past. When I came to the Azure Poseidon Palace this time, the ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound sent Jun Kong in the name of protecting me. Shangguan Mu, told Jianqin about Jun Kong's story without hiding anything. Chapter 2212. He actually wants to kill me? Jianqin was surprised when he heard that. Afterwards, his lips curled into a sneer. He looked at Shangguan Mu, and asked sternly, Mu, Jun Kong is your senior brother. If I come into conflict with your senior brother in the future, what will you do? Although Jun Kong's master has once guided me, I've already helped Jun Kong when Ming Dong wanted to kill him last time. I didn't help him because we both came from the Taoist sect of divine sound. Instead, I helped him because I wanted to repay Jun Kong's master. As a result, if you want to kill Jun Kong, I won't object, Shangguan Mu said without hesitation. Afterwards, she hesitated again. She looked at Jianqin worriedly and continued, however, Jun Kong's master is a chaotic prime after all. Even his master's wife is one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound. If you really do kill Jun Kong, it'll probably lead to quite a lot of trouble. So what if he's a chaotic prime? I've offended so many supreme divine kings in the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. Many of them have organizations that are far more powerful than the Taoist sect of divine sound. I don't even fear those people, let alone a single Jun Kong, Jianqin said fearlessly. Shangguan Mu thought about why Jianqin had been hunted down by so many divine kings in the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. When she heard that, she could not help but ask, what's up with the girl? Is she really the key to obtaining the Cerulean Poseidon Palace? The girl's name is Xiao Man. She's the descendant of the previous master of the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. She possesses the bloodline of the previous master of the Poseidon Palace. Jianqin did not hide anything and told everyone Xiao Man's story. None of the people gathered here were outsiders. Even Rui Di and Ji were clansmen of the Dragon and Phoenix clans that had left the Beast God continent in the past. As a result, Jianqin trusted them very much. Moreover, the matter of Xiao Man had already spread through the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. It was not difficult to guess the uniqueness of her bloodline with just a little thought. It was no secret at all, so there was no need for Jianqin to hide it. As soon as they heard that Xiao Man was the descendant of the previous master of the Cerulean Poseidon Palace, Rui Di and Ji Ye's faces changed. They became slightly excited. Adriana, Shui Yunlan, and Ming Dong remained unfazed. Jianqin's eyes turned slightly cold when he saw Rui Di and Ji Ye's expressions. He said, I've already made an agreement with Xiao Man. I will help her take back the Cerulean Poseidon Palace and retrieve her ancestors' legacy. The warning in Jianqin's words was extremely obvious. He had clearly expressed his attitude. Even if Rui Di and Ji were clansmen of the Dragon and Phoenix clans, they would become his enemies if they tried to lay their hands on the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. Rui Di and Ji Ye's faces changed slightly when they heard that. After a moment of silence, Rui Di said to Jianqin, the Cerulean Poseidon Palace is extremely important. Ji Yi and I have come under the orders of the seniors of our clans. They want us to do everything we can to obtain the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. However, since you're from our homeland, you're not an outsider, and the girl called Xiao Man has some ties with you. If the girl controls the Cerulean Poseidon Palace, it might be a good thing for us. A gleam of light flashed through Aladona's eyes. She stared at Rui Di and Ji sharply and said, since the seniors of your clans place so much importance on the Cerulean Poseidon Palace, they must know just how serious the matters involved in the Cerulean Poseidon Palace are. Obtaining the Cerulean Poseidon Palace might not be a good thing for your sect of dragons and phoenixes. After all, your sect of dragons and phoenixes has only been established for 1,000,000 years. You don't have the heritage and strength to protect the cerulean Poseidon Palace. Genshin was surprised as well. He could not help but look at Auladona curiously and ask, what else is involved in the cerulean Poseidon Palace? Shui Yunlan, Mingdong, and Shangguanmu all turned their heads to look at Adriana. They were curious as well. Auladona became stern and said, I've only heard a little about this from a hall elder after I returned to the God Clan. I only know that the cerulean Poseidon Palace seems to be involved in the war between the Saints' world and the Immortals' world. I don't know the exact reason. However, the cerulean Poseidon Palace was destroyed by the Samsaric Grand Exalt of the Immortals' world because of that. Auladona sighed gently when she reached there. She stared at the world within the cerulean Poseidon Palace in a daze and sighed emotionally. That's because the cerulean Poseidon Palace directly led to an intense battle between two Grand Exalts. According to the records of our God Clan, the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths, one of the 7 Grand Exalts of our Saints' world, never appeared again after his battle against the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Many peak experts of the Saints' world had once said that the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths was dead. The Samsaric Grand Exalt of the Immortals' world was heavily injured as well. When he fled to the Immortals' world, he was intercepted by the blood-tier Grand Exalt of our Saints' world. In the end, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's body was destroyed, and only his soul returned to the Immortals' world. Afterwards, his soul entered Samsara. Genshin was deeply stunned when he heard that. Originally, he thought that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia only because of the war between the two worlds. He had never thought that there would be another reason. Although Genshin was also unable to understand the true reason, he deeply realized that the cerulean Poseidon Palace was definitely not as simple as a high-quality god artifact from Auladona's explanation. Rue D and Ji were stern as well. If everything that Auladona said was true, it really would not be a good thing for their sect of dragons and phoenixes to obtain the cerulean Poseidon Palace. Everyone continued to discuss the cerulean Poseidon Palace. After a while, Shui Yunlan suddenly arrived beside Genshin and said emotionlessly, Genshin, come with me. With that, she directly made her way into the distance. Genshin stared at Shui Yunlan's back and became doubtful. He squeezed Shangguanmu's soft hand and said, I'll be right back. All right, Shangguanmu, and nodded gently as a sliver of gentleness appeared in her enchanting eyes. 100 kilometers away, Shui Yunlan condensed a barrier of ice around herself and Genshin. She stared at Genshin coldly and said, Has the space ring that the 5th prince obtained from the Grand Prime statue on the 12th floor ended up in your hands? That's right. The space ring is on me. What do you want? Genshin's eyes narrowed as he secretly became cautious. I have an agreement with the 5th prince. I will fend off the invaders for him and make time for him. Everything he obtains, including all the cultivation resources, will belong to me. Shui Yunlan stared at Genshin. Genshin frowned when he heard that. He said, That's a matter between you and the 5th prince. What does it have to do with me? Since I obtained the space ring, it belongs to me. Do you want me to complete the agreement between you and the 5th prince? Genshin did not have a good impression of Shui Yunlan. Ignoring the fact that Shui Yunlan had committed such a heinous act on the Tianyuan continent, just the fact that she had sealed Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish in ice on the icy plains was something that Genshin struggled to forgive. Shui Yunlan's face did not change at all. Her gaze remained cold, without any emotion at all. She said icily, Of course it's related to you. Do you know why I've come to the cerulean Poseidon Palace? Why do you want to help the 5th prince? It's all because of your sister. Sister? What's wrong with my sister? Genshin's face changed when he heard her mention his sister. His gaze sharpened in a single moment as he stared at Shui Yunlan closely. He called out loudly as he became extremely uneasy inside. P.S. Xiaoyao has clearly updated recently, but I've received many complaints from readers that I haven't updated today. There have even been some readers who have complained to me, saying that I haven't updated in many days. When Xiaoyao saw the news, he truly felt that he had been wronged. Xiaoyao would like to explain it to everyone here. Currently, the Chaos Sword God has a lot of reading platforms. All the platforms that charge a fee are authentic, but these platforms are not the first websites. What are the first websites? They're the platforms that can be seen immediately after the author's update. Only then are they the first websites. As for the other platforms, there will often be delays. There might even be a few platforms where the chapters will not be synchronized for several days, or they might even stop updating altogether. As a result, in order for everyone to keep up with the latest situation of the Chaos Sword God, please listen to Xiaoyao's WeChat account, Xingxingxiao 110. Chapter 2213. Jianqin was just far too concerned about his sister. As soon as he heard that Shui Yunlan had actually come to Poseidon Palace for his sister, he immediately believed that something bad had happened to his sister, or that she had been harmed in some way. A gleam of light immediately flashed through Shui Yunlan's cold eyes when she saw how intense Jianqin's reaction was. She said, "Don't worry, your sister is fine. She's in an extremely safe place." Jianqin immediately stopped worrying when he heard that his sister was fine. He slowly calmed down as well. He stared at Shui Yunlan with flickering eyes and said coldly, "Then why did you say that you came to Poseidon Palace for my sister? I want to know the reason." Shui Yunlan fell silent. She stared at Jianqin emotionlessly as the light in her eyes flickered slightly. Clearly, she was hesitating. Jianqin could clearly see Shui Yunlan's hesitation as well. He said, "If you don't plan on telling me the truth, then don't even think about getting anything from me. Even if you're very powerful, it won't be easy for you to keep me here. As a result, if you want to take it by force, I'd advise you to give up on that as soon as possible." Shui Yunlan seemed to see Jianqin's determination in his eyes. She sighed secretly. At that moment, she actually felt helpless inside. She had never thought that the insignificant figure that was even less than an ant in her eyes back on the Tianyuan continent would actually be bold enough to stand before her and threaten her fearlessly. While she sighed, she also found it rather difficult to accept. After quite a while of silence, Shui Yunlan still spoke in the end. She said with her icy cold voice that seemed to never change, "Your sister is the snow goddess of the ice goddess hall. She died in a battle in the past, but fortunately her highness' soul was not destroyed. Instead, a sliver of her soul was left behind for her reincarnation. The great ice goddess used her own bloodline as a guide to calculate that her highness would reincarnate into a lower world, and she found the exact location. As a result, I was ordered to come to the Tianyuan continent and shoulder the heavy responsibility of searching for her highness. I waited on the Tianyuan continent for over 3 million years before I finally saw Her Majesty reincarnate. Originally, I wanted to take Her Majesty away from the Tianyuan continent once she reached a certain level of strength and directly return to the Ice Goddess Hall in the Saints' World. But at that moment, Mo Tianyin, who had disappeared from the Tianyuan continent for a long time, appeared. When Mo Tianyin was mentioned, Shui Yunlan's gaze became mixed as well. Jianqin was stunned when he heard the name Mo Tianyin. He could not help but think about when he had first discovered the Yinyang Saint Rock with Shangguan Mu. At that time, he had obtained the method of dual cultivation from Mo Tianyin, which allowed him to grasp the balance of yin and yang. As a result, he was able to absorb the energy from the Yinyang Saint Rock with Shangguan Mu so smoothly, increasing his strength drastically. However, they had only encountered a clone of Mo Tianyin back then, not Mo Tianyin himself. Shui Yunlan continued, "Mo Tianyin brought me news from the Saints' World. From him, I learned that something had happened to the Ice Goddess Hall in the Saints' World. Wu Han, who was one of the 4 great protectors like me, had actually colluded with Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall. She had already taken control of the Ice Goddess Hall and wanted to do something detrimental to the Ice Goddess. In the beginning, I was doubtful about this matter. I did not believe it completely. However, it was exactly because of Mo Tianyun's warning that I became cautious. When I returned to the Saint's world with Her Majesty, I did not return to the Ice Goddess Hall rashly. Instead, I changed my name and changed my appearance to investigate the Ice Goddess Hall. When she reached there, Shui Yunlan could not help but tremble gently. Undisguised anger rose up from the bottom of her heart, causing her exposed, icy-cold eyes to become stern. She said coldly, "I really refuse to believe that Mo Tianyun's news is actually true. Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall has actually colluded with Wu Han and taken control of the Ice Goddess Hall. Even the elders of the Ice Goddess Hall have fallen to their hands. The Ice Goddess Hall possesses an extremely vast amount of cultivation resources, as well as cultivation methods that are extremely suitable for Her Majesty to recover. Holy Emperor, originally, I only needed to take Her Majesty back to the Ice Goddess Hall. With the tremendous resources and heritage of the Ice Goddess Hall, it would not take long for Her Majesty to recover. However, now that the Ice Goddess Hall has been attacked, not only do I not dare to take Her Majesty back to the Ice Goddess Hall, but I even have to change my name and not expose our identities. Without sufficient divine crystals and heavenly resources, without the protection of a powerful organization, and having to hide your identity at all times to prevent Wu Han and Nan Patian from finding traces of Your Highness, it will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for Your Highness to recover under these circumstances." Shui Yunlan's eyes became gloomy. Her icy cold voice was filled with bitterness as she said, "I did not come to Poseidon Palace this time for the legacy. My main objective was to obtain some cultivation resources and help Her Majesty recover. As a result, when I saw someone gain the recognition of a Grand Prime's legacy, I assisted him without any hesitation at all. I only hoped that I could obtain the cultivation resources in the legacy from him because Her Majesty really lacks cultivation resources right now." After learning the entire story from Shui Yunlan, Jianqin fell silent. He was not surprised by his sister's identity, because he had already learned that she was the reincarnation of a great figure back on the Tianyuan continent. However, he did not care about that. The care and love his sister had shown him when he was young had already been engraved into his heart. As a result, no matter who his sister's true identity was, her position in his heart would never be shaken. However, he had never thought that his sister would have such a difficult time in the Saint's world. This made his heart ache. It was not a good feeling. What are the cultivations of Nan Patian and Wu Han right now? Jianqin's eyes turned slightly cold as he asked sternly. He had once heard about Nan Patian from Fairy Haoyue, and he had also learnt about Nan Potion's cultivation from Fairy Haoyue. However, that was several 100,000 years ago. Nan Patian is a peak chaotic prime. It's said that he's only a step away from Grand Prime. As for Wu Han, she's an infinite prime. With Wu Han's talent, she's probably reached the peak of infinite prime after such a long time. She might even have broken through to chaotic prime, Shui Yunlan said sternly. Not only was she the most talented out of the 4 guards in the past, but she was also the most powerful. It was just that she had stayed on the Tianyuan continent for over 3 million years, which had delayed her progress. The Ice Goddess is one of the 7 grand exalts. Can Nan Patian and Wu Han control the Ice Goddess Hall so easily? Jianqin asked in doubt. Grand exalts were experts who had truly reached the peak of grand primes. They were true sovereigns of the world, existences that were like the laws of the world. Even with the entire Saints' world in perspective, there were only a handful of them. Yet they were forced into a passive position by a chaotic prime and an infinite prime so easily. And the Ice Goddess Hall must be a god artifact of quite a high grade as well, right? Don't god artifacts have an artifact spirit? Jianqin asked. A cold light flashed through Shui Yunlan's eyes. She said coldly, "You're right. The Ice Goddess Hall isn't just the name of an organization. It's also a peak god artifact refined by the Ice Goddess. It's even more powerful than the Azure Poseidon Palace. As long as you're in the Ice Goddess Hall, you can easily kill Nanpatian and Wuhan by using the artifact spirit to control the Divine Hall's power. But in reality, the Ice Goddess Hall has really fallen. What does that mean? It means that there's someone else behind Nanpatian and Wuhan.